Story 1. The Mirror Truck. Jake Patterson had been hauling freight across the Midwest for 17 years, and in that time, he'd seen just about everything the open road had to offer. At 42 years old, with a wife and 2 kids back in Oklahoma City, he considered himself a professional through and through. He knew every truck stop between Tulsa and Chicago, could navigate by the stars if his GPS failed, and had logged over 2 million miles without a single accident. The night of October 14, 2019, on Interstate 80 through Nebraska was supposed to be just another run. It was. The load was standard, industrial equipment destined for a manufacturing plant outside of Des Moines. Jake had picked up the freight in Denver that morning, and the route was one he'd driven dozens of times. The weather was clear, unseasonably warm for mid-October, and traffic light. He'd fueled up at the TA in North Platte around 8 p.m., grabbed a sandwich and coffee, and merged back onto the interstate feeling good about making his delivery window. Around 10:30, somewhere between Ogallala and North Platte, Jake noticed headlights in his mirror. Not unusual, plenty of trucks ran this corridor at night, but something about these particular lights caught his attention. They stayed at exactly the same distance behind him, maintaining perfect pace no matter whether he sped up or slowed down. When he pushed to 72 miles per hour, the truck behind him matched his speed. When he eased back to 65, it did the same. Jake tried to get a better look through his side mirrors, but the headlights created too much glare. He could make out the basic shape of a semi, possibly a Peterbilt or Kenworth, but couldn't see any identifying features. The trailer appeared to be a standard 53-footer, similar to his own. He reached for his CB radio and switched to channel 19. Breaker 19, this is Redline running eastbound on I-80 at mile marker 208. Got a truck on my tail maintaining distance. You got your ears on, driver, Static answered him. He tried again. Eastbound truck near North Platte, you copying? Nothing but empty air. The truck continued to follow him with mechanical precision. Jake told himself it was coincidence. Maybe the driver had cruise control set at the same speed, maybe he was spacing out or talking on his phone. But something felt wrong. The distance between them never varied by more than a few feet. It was too perfect, too deliberate. At mile marker 220, Jake decided to test his theory. Without signaling, he accelerated to 78 miles per hour. The truck behind him responded instantly, accelerating at exactly the same rate, maintaining that same impossible distance. Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His heart rate picked up. He eased off the accelerator, dropping to 55. The truck behind him slowed perfectly, staying locked in position like it was tethered to his trailer. The next exit was 12 miles ahead, a small rest area with no services. Jake considered pulling off, but something stopped him. An instinct maybe, or just the creeping fear that had started to build in his chest. Instead, he tried the CB again. This time when he keyed the mic, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Static, yes, but underneath it, barely audible, his own voice. Playing back the exact words he'd just spoken, but delayed by about 2 seconds, like an echo that shouldn't exist. Jake switched off the CB and focused on the road. The dotted white lines blurred past in hypnotic rhythm. The truck behind him never wavered. He tried to look at his side mirrors without turning his head, tried to catch some detail of the vehicle stalking him, but the headlights washed everything out in brilliant white light. Then he noticed something that sent a cold spike of fear through his gut. His trailer. He could see it in the mirror truck's headlights, the familiar red color, the company logo on the side, even the slight dent near the rear door from where a forklift had bumped it in Shreveport 3 months ago. But that wasn't what scared him. What scared him was the angle. The truck behind him was positioned so that he could see his own trailer illuminated in its lights, but he couldn't see it in his own mirrors. That wasn't possible. The geometry didn't work. Jake blinked hard, rubbed his eyes with one hand. Fatigue, he told himself, playing tricks on your mind. But when he looked again, it was worse. He could now see his own cab in the reflection of the mirror truck's windshield. Could see himself sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Could see it all from behind, as if he were looking at himself from the following truck's perspective. His phone rang. The sudden noise in the quiet cab made him jump. He grabbed it from the cup holder. It was his wife, Sarah. He almost didn't answer, didn't want to try to explain what was happening when he couldn't explain it to himself, but he needed to hear a normal voice. "Hey, babe," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jake, where are you?" Sarah's voice sounded strange, distant. "I-80 heading east through Nebraska, should be in Des Moines by morning. Why, what's wrong?" There was a long pause, too long. "Jake, I'm looking at the map. Your truck is stopped. It says you've been stationary at mile marker 214 for the past 40 minutes. That's not possible. I'm moving. I'm doing 65 right now." He glanced at his speedometer to confirm. The needle held steady at 65. "The app says you're not moving. Maybe it's a glitch." Jake looked in his mirror again. The truck was still there, still maintaining that perfect distance. "Sarah, I need to go. I'll call you back." "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, fine. Just. I'll call you back." He hung up before she could respond. Mile marker 214. He looked for the markers as they passed. 215, 216, 217. He was moving. The road was passing beneath him, but according to the GPS tracking his company used, he was stopped 20 miles back. The mirror truck's headlights suddenly brightened, flooding his cab with intense white light. Jake squinted against the glare. When his vision adjusted, he saw something that made him want to scream. The truck behind him was identical to his own. Not just similar, identical. Same model Freightliner Cascadia. Same red trailer with the same company logo. Same dent near the rear door. And in the driver's seat of the mirror truck, he could see himself. Not a different driver who looked like him, himself. Same flannel shirt. Same baseball cap. Same scar on his left hand from a knife slip 10 years ago that he could see gripping the steering wheel. Jake stomped on the brakes. His truck shuddered and slowed, the trailer's weight pushing against the cab. The mirror truck should have rear-ended him, should have smashed into his trailer at 65 miles per hour. Instead, it stopped at exactly the same rate, maintaining that impossible distance. He sat there on the interstate, hazard lights flashing, breathing hard. The mirror truck sat behind him, engine running, headlights bright. Jake grabbed his CB again. Anyone on this channel, I need help. I-80 eastbound, mile marker 227, please respond." His own voice came back to him through the speaker, but the words were wrong. Anyone on this channel, I need help. I-80 westbound, mile marker 227, please respond. Westbound, but he was going east. Wasn't he? Jake looked at his compass. East. He was definitely heading east. But the mirror truck, he focused on it again, looked at the road behind it stretching into the darkness. The dotted white lines were on the wrong side. The road signs were backward, their text reversed in mirror image. A semi roared past in the westbound lanes, its air horn blaring. Normal. Real. Jake watched it disappear into the night, then looked back at his mirror. The truck was still there. Now he could see the driver's face clearly. His face, looking back at him with an expression of absolute terror. He put his truck in gear and accelerated, not caring about speed limits, not caring about anything except getting away. The speedometer climbed past 80. The mirror truck matched him effortlessly. Mile markers blurred past. 230, 240, 250. The exit for Lexington appeared, and Jake took it without slowing, his trailer swaying dangerously as he hit the ramp too fast. The mirror truck followed him down the exit, followed him through the deserted town, followed him as he ran a red light and turned onto a county road heading north, away from the interstate, away from anything familiar. For 3 hours, Jake drove on back roads through the Nebraska night, the mirror truck always behind him, always maintaining that precise distance. He tried every trick he knew, sudden stops, sharp turns, even driving the wrong way down a one-way street in a tiny town called Kazed. Nothing worked. The truck stayed with him like his own shadow. Finally, as the eastern sky began to lighten with false dawn, Jake pulled into a truck stop outside of Broken Bow. He was exhausted, terrified, running on fumes. The mirror truck pulled in behind him, parking in the adjacent spot. Jake sat in his cab, hands shaking, watching the other truck in his mirror. The driver, his mirror self, sat motionless, watching back. For 10 minutes, neither of them moved. Then the other Jake opened his door and climbed down from the cab. Jake did the same, as if pulled by invisible strings. They stood 20 feet apart in the empty parking lot, the morning mist swirling around their feet. They were identical. Same height, same build, same clothes, same exhausted expression. The other Jake spoke first. "Which one of us is real?" Jake opened his mouth to answer, then realized he couldn't know. "How long have you been following me?" "I'm not following you, you're following me. I've been trying to lose you for hours." They stared at each other as the truth settled in. Neither of them knew who had started as the original and who had appeared as the mirror. Neither could prove their reality was the real one. "What do we do?" Jake asked. The other Jake shook his head. "I don't know." A real truck pulled into the lot, a Werner semi with a different driver. Both Jakes turned to watch it park. When they looked back at each other, Jake saw the same desperate hope in his mirror's eyes that he felt in his own chest. "We can't both be real," the other Jake said. "Maybe we can," Jake replied. "Maybe we just keep driving separate directions." They stood in silence for another moment, then simultaneously nodded. Without another word, they climbed back into their respective cabs. Jake drove south. The mirror truck drove north. In his rear view mirror, Jake watched it disappear. He didn't know if he'd been freed from the mirror or if he was the mirror being freed from the original. Jake never made the Des Moines delivery. He called in sick, drove back to Oklahoma City, and quit his job the following week. He tells people he retired early, that 17 years was enough time on the road. But sometimes, late at night, he looks at his reflection in the bathroom mirror and wonders if the man looking back is really him, or if somewhere in Nebraska, another Jake Patterson is living his life, having made the other choice that morning in Broken Bow. Story 2. The Phantom Rest Stop. Marcus Webb had been driving for Peterson Logistics for 9 years, and in that time, he developed the kind of route discipline that separated professionals from amateurs. At 36, he was meticulous about his logs, his maintenance schedules, and his rest stops. He knew exactly where to fuel for the best price, which truck stops had the cleanest showers, and where the speed traps hid along every major highway in the continental United States. What happened on Highway 50 through Nevada on July 22, 2021, violated everything he thought he knew about the roads he traveled. The run was straightforward: electronics from Sacramento to a distribution center in Kansas City. Marcus had departed California at 5 a.m., crossed into Nevada by mid-morning, and settled into the long, lonely stretch of Highway 50 that locals called the loneliest road in America. The nickname wasn't an exaggeration. For miles at a time, Marcus saw no other vehicles, no buildings, nothing but desert scrub and distant mountains shimmering in the summer heat. Around 3 p.m., with the temperature gauge reading 102 degrees outside, Marcus noticed his fuel level dropping faster than expected. He'd filled up in Fallon, which should have given him enough to reach Ely, but the gauge showed less than a quarter tank. He frowned, tapped the gauge, and checked his trip odometer. The math didn't add up. He should have at least 150 miles of range left, but the needle suggested otherwise. He grabbed his atlas. Marcus always kept a paper backup despite having GPS, and traced his finger along Highway 50. According to the map, there was nothing between his current position and Ely except empty desert. No gas stations, no services of any kind for another 97 miles. But according to his fuel gauge, he'd never make it. "Damn it," he muttered, calculating his options. He could push forward and hope the gauge was faulty, or he could turn back toward Fallon, adding hours to his trip. Neither option was good. Then he saw the sign. Green, reflective, standard highway issue. Rest area 2 miles. Marcus blinked, certain he'd misread it. He knew this stretch of road. There was no rest area here. He'd driven Highway 50 at least 20 times, and he'd never seen a rest area between Fallon and Austin. But there it was, clear as day. 2 miles later, exactly as promised, an exit appeared on the right. A paved road led away from the highway toward a cluster of buildings barely visible against the desert landscape. Marcus hesitated. Something felt off. But his fuel gauge was now reading under a quarter tank, and the needle seemed to be dropping as he watched. He took the exit. The road was smooth, recently paved from the look of it, without the cracks and patches that characterized most Nevada back roads. It curved through low hills, and after about half a mile the rest area came into view. It was larger than Marcus expected, a main building that looked like a visitor center, several shade structures with picnic tables, and most importantly, what appeared to be fuel pumps. The parking lot was empty. No other vehicles, no people visible anywhere. The place had an odd stillness to it, as if the heat had driven away even the desert wind. Marcus pulled into a parking spot near the main building and shut off his engine. The silence that followed was absolute. He climbed down from his cab and the heat hit him like a physical force. But something was wrong with it. The temperature felt the same as it had on the highway, but the quality of the heat was different. It felt older somehow, stale, like air that had been trapped in a closed room for years. The main building was a modern structure, all glass and steel, completely at odds with the desolate surroundings. Through the windows, Marcus could see lights on inside, displays of some kind, but no movement. He walked toward the entrance, his boots crunching on the pristine pavement. The door opened automatically with a soft whoosh. Inside, the air conditioning was running full blast, cold enough to make Marcus shiver after the desert heat. The interior was set up like a museum. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with artifacts and displays. But as Marcus looked closer, his confusion deepened. The displays weren't about Nevada history or desert wildlife as he'd expected. They were about Highway 50 itself. Photographs lined the walls, black and white images of trucks from different eras. 1950s semis with rounded hoods. 1970s rigs with CB antennas. Modern Peterbilts and Kenworths. Each photo showed a truck stopped in what appeared to be this very parking lot, though the building in the background was different in each image, evolving from a simple wooden structure to the modern facility he now stood in. Under each photograph was a plaque with a name, a date, and a brief description. Marcus read the nearest one: Robert Chen, May 3, 1987. Route: Reno to Denver. Last seen at mile marker 74. The next: Jennifer Hallbrook, November 18, 1995. Route: Salt Lake City to San Francisco. Last seen at mile marker 74. Marcus felt his skin prickle. Mile marker 74. He pulled out his atlas again, traced the highway with his finger. There was no mile marker 74 on this section of Highway 50. The markers jumped from 71 to 78, had for as long as he'd been driving this route. He moved deeper into the building. More displays, more photographs, dozens of them, all truckers, all listing the same location for their last known position. The dates ranged from 1952 to Marcus stopped cold. The most recent date was yesterday, July 21, 2021. The photo showed a woman, maybe 50 years old, standing next to a bright red Volvo semi. The plaque read, Catherine Moore, July 21, 2021. Route: Sacramento to Kansas City. Sacramento to Kansas City. Marcus's exact route. His phone rang, the sound shockingly loud in the silent building. He fumbled it from his pocket. Sarah, his girlfriend, he answered with shaking hands. Hey, you okay? Her voice sounded distant, filled with static. Yeah, I stopped at a rest area. Something's not right here. Rest area? Marcus, your GPS shows you still on Highway 50. You haven't stopped. I'm stopped right now. I can see my truck through the window. The tracking system says you're moving. Says you've been maintaining steady speed for the last 2 hours. Marcus looked out the window. His truck sat exactly where he'd parked it, motionless in the empty lot. "That's not possible." The call dropped. Marcus tried to call back, but his phone showed no signal. No bars, no service, nothing. He walked to the window and stared at his truck, looking for any sign that it was moving, that Sarah's information was somehow correct. It was. The truck was stationary, he was certain of it. A door at the back of the building caught his attention. It was marked staff only, but like everything else in this place, something about it felt wrong. Marcus tried the handle. It opened easily. The room beyond was an office, any office Marcus had ever seen. The walls were covered in maps, dozens of maps of Highway 50, each from a different year. And on each map, someone had marked the same location with a red circle. Mile marker 74, a place that didn't exist. On the desk sat a logbook, old and worn. Marcus opened it, flipped through pages of handwritten entries. Each entry followed the same format: a name, a date, a time, and a brief note. He found the most recent entry: Catherine Moore, July 21, 2021, 3:47 p.m. Fuel gauge failure initiated. Subject diverted successfully. Integration complete at 4:23 p.m. Integration. The word sent ice through Marcus's veins. He flipped back through the pages. Hundreds of entries stretching back decades, all following the same pattern: fuel gauge failure, diversion, integration. He looked at his watch. 3:52 p.m. According to the logbook, he had maybe half an hour. Marcus ran from the building, sprinted to his truck. His hands fumbled with the door handle. Inside, he twisted the key in the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. He tried again. Nothing. The dashboard lights flickered and went dark. Through the windshield, he saw the main building's door open. A figure emerged, too distant to make out clearly, but moving toward him with deliberate steps. Marcus tried the ignition again, pumping the accelerator, knowing even as he did it that it wouldn't help. The figure was closer now. Close enough for Marcus to see that it was wearing a uniform of some kind, though the style was wrong, outdated. Close enough to see that its movements were off, jerky and mechanical. Marcus abandoned the truck, started running toward the exit road on foot. The pavement stretched ahead of him, the highway visible in the distance. He was young, fit from years of climbing in and out of his cab, loading and unloading cargo. He could make it. He'd covered maybe 100 yards when he looked back. The figure had stopped at his truck, was standing beside it, watching him run. But the truck was moving. Not driving, moving. Fading, becoming translucent like a photograph left too long in the sun. Marcus ran harder, his breath burning in his lungs. The exit road seemed longer than he remembered, the highway receding rather than getting closer. He checked his watch. 4:15 p.m. 8 minutes if the logbook was accurate. 8 minutes until integration, whatever that meant. The desert around him began to change. The colors washed out, becoming less real. The heat faded, replaced by a neutral emptiness that had no taste at all. His footfalls made no sound on the pavement. Marcus could see the highway clearly now, could see trucks passing on it, their normal speed looking impossibly fast from his perspective. He was 20 feet from the exit, 10 feet, 5. He reached out toward the highway as if he could grab it, pull himself back into the real world. His hand passed through the air where the highway should have been. Not blocked by anything, not hitting a barrier, just passing through empty space where his eyes insisted the road existed. He was still in the rest area, still on the exit road. But the highway was somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't reach. His watch read 4:23 p.m. Marcus felt it then, the integration. It started as a pulling sensation, like he was being tugged backward by invisible hands. The rest area began to solidify around him, becoming more real while he became less. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The last thing he saw clearly was another truck, a blue Peterbilt, taking the exit toward the rest area. The driver looked confused, checking his fuel gauge, making the same decision Marcus had made. Marcus tried to wave, to warn him, but his arms wouldn't respond. Then he was back in the building, standing motionless in front of a new display case. Inside was a photograph of himself, standing next to his truck in the parking lot. The plaque underneath read, Marcus Webb, July 22, 2021. Route, Sacramento to Kansas City. Last seen at mile marker 74. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. Could only watch as the driver of the blue Peterbilt entered the building, walked past Marcus without seeming to see him, and began reading the plaques with growing horror. Marcus stands there still, one of dozens of frozen figures positioned throughout the building like mannequins in a department store. He's aware of everything, the passage of time, the new drivers who arrive every few weeks or months, the ones who manage to escape and the ones who, like him, leave their truck just moments too late. He watches them all, unable to warn them, unable to help. The Highway 50 rest area at mile marker 74 doesn't appear on any maps because it isn't always there. It shifts, appears when it needs to, when it's hungry for another traveler to add to its collection. The building grows larger with each addition, the museum expanding to accommodate its new exhibits. And somewhere, on a real highway in real Nevada, Marcus Webb's truck continues driving itself toward Kansas City, its cargo delivered on schedule 3 days after it appeared, the cab empty when security opened it at the distribution center. The company attributed it to theft, assumed Marcus had abandoned the load. They never found him. How could they, when he's standing in a place that doesn't exist, watching an endless parade of doomed drivers make the same choice he made, unable to do anything but bear witness to his own terrible mistake? Story 3. The wrong cargo. Lisa Brennan had been hauling refrigerated cargo for Arctic Express for 6 years, specializing in long-haul runs that most drivers found tedious. At 31, she appreciated the solitude, the rhythm of the road, and the challenge of maintaining cold chain integrity across thousands of miles. She was professional, punctual, and proud of her perfect safety record. On September 8, 2020, she picked up a refrigerated trailer in Portland, Oregon, with a manifest that listed the contents as medical supplies bound for a research facility in Atlanta. The paperwork was in order, the seals were intact, and everything seemed routine. It was. The pickup had been unusual from the start, though Lisa didn't recognize the warning signs until later. The warehouse was located in an industrial area she'd never serviced before, despite running Portland routes for years. The facility had no signage, just a street number on a rusted metal door. When she'd backed up to the loading dock at 6 a.m., no workers came out to meet her. Instead, she found the trailer already sealed and connected to a refrigeration unit, sitting in the loading bay with paperwork taped to the door. The manifest was detailed: 68 cubic feet of medical supplies, temperature to be maintained at exactly 34 degrees Fahrenheit, delivery deadline in 72 hours. The seal number matched the paperwork. Everything checked out. Lisa hooked up the trailer, verified the refrigeration unit was running properly, and pulled out of Portland at 6:45 a.m., right on schedule. The first sign that something was wrong came outside of Boise, Idaho, 14 hours into the run. Lisa had stopped for fuel and her mandatory rest break at a pilot truck stop. As she walked around the trailer for her standard inspection, she noticed something odd. The refrigeration unit was running. She could hear it and feel the cold air, but the temperature gauge showed 48 degrees, 14 degrees above where it should be. Lisa immediately checked the unit's controls. Everything appeared normal. She reset it, watched it cycle through its startup sequence, saw the temperature reading drop to 47, then 46. But it stuck there, hovering between 46 and 48 degrees despite the unit running at full capacity. She tried the emergency override. Nothing changed. She called the dispatch number on her paperwork. No answer. Called again, left a voicemail. Tried the shipper's number listed on the manifest. The number was disconnected. Lisa felt the first flutter of unease. Medical supplies had strict temperature requirements. If the cold chain was compromised, the entire shipment could be worthless. But she had no way to contact anyone, and the delivery deadline was firm. Lisa made a decision. She'd continue to Atlanta, document everything, and report the temperature issue upon delivery. The unit was still providing refrigeration, just not to the exact specification. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option available. She got back on the road. By the time she crossed into Wyoming, the temperature gauge was reading 52 degrees. The unit was still running, still blowing cold air, but something was preventing it from maintaining proper temperature. Lisa considered finding a repair facility, but it was nearly midnight, and truck-friendly repair shops in rural Wyoming were non-existent. Around 2 a.m., somewhere on I-80 between Rawlins and Laramie, Lisa heard the first thump from the trailer. It was distinct, solid, like something heavy shifting inside. She checked her mirrors, saw nothing unusual, and told herself it was the cargo settling. Refrigerated trailers often made noise as their contents froze and thawed slightly with temperature variations. 10 minutes later, another thump, then another. A rhythm started to develop. Thump, pause, thump, pause, too regular to be cargo shifting. Lisa's hands tightened on the wheel. The temperature gauge now read 57 degrees. The refrigeration unit was losing the battle against whatever was happening inside that trailer. At 3:15 a.m., Lisa pulled into the Little America truck stop in Cheyenne. She parked away from the other trucks, climbed down from the cab, and approached the trailer with her flashlight. The thumping had stopped. The night was cold, but the air around the trailer felt colder, unnaturally so. Frost had formed on the outside of the trailer walls, thick and white, despite the temperature gauge reading well above freezing inside. Lisa walked along the trailer's length, shining her light on the seals. They were intact. She put her hand against the trailer's side. It was ice cold, cold enough that her palm stuck slightly to the metal when she pulled. But that made no sense. If the inside was 57 degrees, the exterior shouldn't be cold enough to form frost. She was about to walk back to her cab when she heard it. Not a thump this time. A voice. Muffled, distant, but definitely a voice, coming from inside the trailer. Hello. The word was barely audible through the insulated walls. Lisa's blood ran cold. There couldn't be anyone in there. The trailer had been sealed. She de-inspected the seals herself. Is someone in there? She called out. Please, cold, please. The voice was weak, desperate. Lisa ran to the back of the trailer, grabbing the seal to break it. Her dispatcher would be furious. There'd be questions and reports and probably a formal investigation, but if someone was trapped inside, she had to get them out. She grabbed the seal and pulled. It didn't break. She pulled harder. The plastic seal, which should have snapped easily, wouldn't budge. She grabbed her utility knife from her belt and started sawing at the seal. The plastic was tough, but the blade should have cut through it in seconds. Instead, the knife skidded off the surface as if the plastic had turned to steel. Lisa sawed harder, putting her weight into it. The blade broke. Help me. The voice was clearer now, stronger. Multiple voices, she realized. At least 3 different people, all speaking at once. So cold, please. Help us. Lisa ran to her cab, grabbed her phone, and dialed 911. The call wouldn't connect. She had full bars, but the call just wouldn't go through. She tried again. Same result. Tried calling her dispatcher, her emergency contact, even her sister in Florida. Nothing would connect. The voices from the trailer were getting louder. Not screaming, not panicking, just a steady chorus of please. Cold, help, please, so cold. Over and over, a dozen voices or more, all overlapping. Lisa grabbed a tire iron from her cab and approached the trailer's rear doors. If she couldn't break the seal, she'd force the locking mechanism. She wedged the iron into the door seam and pushed with all her strength. The metal bent, but the door didn't open. She repositioned and tried again. The tire iron snapped in half. Let us out, please. We're cold, so cold. Help us. The temperature gauge on the refrigeration unit now read 63 degrees. But when Lisa touched the trailer, it was so cold it burned her hand. She jerked back, looking at her palm. The skin was red and blistered as if from frostbite. Other truckers were starting to notice her. A driver from a swift truck parked 3 spaces over walked toward her. "You all right, miss? There are people in my trailer. I can hear them. They're trapped." The driver frowned, walked to the trailer, and put his ear against the side. He listened for a long moment, then stepped back. "I don't hear anything. Listen closer. They're calling for help." He pressed his ear to the metal again, shook his head. Just the refrigeration unit running, nothing else. But Lisa could hear them clearly. The voices were constant now, a wall of sound, dozens of people all begging to be released from the cold. "You can't hear that." "Hear what? You sure you're okay? Maybe you should take a break, get some coffee." Lisa stared at him. He genuinely couldn't hear the voices. She could see it in his expression. He thought she was having some kind of episode, maybe hallucinating from exhaustion. "I'm fine," she said. "Just thought I heard something settle weird in the load. Thanks." The driver nodded, gave her a concerned look, and walked back to his truck. Lisa stood alone in the parking lot, listening to the chorus of voices begging for release, voices that apparently only she could hear. She got back in her cab, locked the doors, and sat shaking. The logical part of her brain insisted there was an explanation. Fatigue-induced auditory hallucinations, stress, maybe a carbon monoxide leak in the cab affecting her judgment. But her hands were still blistered from touching the impossible cold of the trailer's exterior. Lisa started her engine and pulled out of the truck stop. She drove east, listening to the voices, trying to ignore them. But they were relentless. By the time she reached Nebraska, she could distinguish individual words, individual pleas. A woman asking for her children. A man saying he had to get home. A teenager crying that she was supposed to graduate next week. The temperature gauge read 71 degrees. The frost on the exterior of the trailer had grown thicker, now nearly an inch of ice covering every surface. Other drivers honked and pointed as she passed, indicating her trailer, but Lisa didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She had to reach Atlanta, had to deliver this cargo, had to make this nightmare end. In Iowa, the voices started saying her name. "Lisa, Lisa, please, we know you can hear us. Please let us out. We're so cold, Lisa, please." She screamed at them to shut up, pounded on the sleeper wall that separated her from the trailer. The voices just got louder, more insistent. By Illinois, they were constant, overlapping, a cacophony of desperate pleading that filled every moment. Lisa stopped trying to sleep. She drove straight through, fueled by truck stop coffee and pure terror, listening to the dead. Because that's what they had to be. She'd finally accepted that, begging for release. The manifest had said medical supplies, but Lisa knew now what was really in that trailer. Bodies. Had to be bodies. Dozens of them, maybe more. Transported for some purpose she couldn't imagine and didn't want to know. She crossed into Georgia 58 hours after leaving Portland. The delivery location was listed as a research facility outside Atlanta, but when Lisa's GPS guided her to the address, there was nothing there. Just an empty field with overgrown grass and a rusted gate. The coordinates were correct. She'd triple-checked, but there was no facility, no building, no sign that anything had ever been there. Lisa pulled to the side of the access road and sat with her head against the steering wheel. The voices had fallen silent an hour ago, somewhere around the Georgia state line. The refrigeration unit had stopped running. The temperature gauge was dead, but the trailer was still there, still connected to her cab, still covered in impossible frost. She got out and walked to the trailer one more time. The seals were gone, not broken, gone, as if they'd never existed. The locking mechanism was unlocked. Lisa grabbed the handle and pulled. The door swung open easily. The trailer was empty. Completely, absolutely empty. No medical supplies, no bodies, no cargo of any kind, just bare walls and a floor and the residual cold of the refrigeration unit. No evidence that anything had ever been loaded in Portland. Lisa's phone rang. She answered automatically. "Hello, Ms. Brennan. This is Arctic Express Dispatch. We're calling to cancel your Atlanta run. The shipper has withdrawn the order. Please return the empty trailer to our Portland facility at your earliest convenience." Empty? The trailer's empty. According to our records, yes. The load was canceled before pickup. You should have an empty trailer. Is there a problem? Lisa looked into the vacant space, then at her blistered hands at the ice covering the exterior. "No," she said quietly. "No problem. I'll return to Portland." She closed the trailer doors, climbed back in her cab, and started the long drive back to Oregon. The voices didn't return. The refrigeration unit started working normally. The frost gradually melted away. By the time she reached Idaho, everything was normal except for the blisters on her hands and the memory of those desperate voices. Lisa delivered the empty trailer to the Portland facility. The same unmarked warehouse, the same loading dock. But this time, when she disconnected the trailer and pulled away, she looked in her mirror and saw workers emerge from the building. 3 of them, wearing white coveralls, approaching the trailer with specialized equipment. She never took another refrigerated load, switched to dry freight exclusively even though it paid less. Sometimes late at night, when the road is empty and the world is quiet, she still hears them. Faint, distant, but there. Voices calling from the cold, asking why she didn't help them, asking why she left them behind, asking her to come back and finish the delivery. The manifest is still in her file box, tucked away in a drawer she never opens. The shipper's address leads nowhere. The phone numbers are disconnected. The facility in Atlanta doesn't exist. But somewhere, Lisa knows, that trailer is being loaded again, sealed again, sent out with another driver who doesn't know what they're carrying. And somewhere, someone else is starting to hear the voices, starting to see the impossible frost, starting to learn that some deliveries were never meant to be completed. Story 4. The following headlights. Daniel Kovac had been driving the Alaska Highway for 12 years, running supplies from Dawson Creek in British Columbia up to Fairbanks and back. At 49 years old, with a full beard gone gray and eyes that had seen every kind of northern weather, he considered himself an expert on the route. The Alaska Highway wasn't for amateurs. Over 1,500 miles of remote wilderness, sparse services, and weather that could turn deadly in minutes. Daniel knew every curve, every repair shop, every safe place to pull over. On November 11, 2018, heading south from Fairbanks with a load of machinery parts, he encountered something on the highway that his 12 years of experience couldn't explain. The run had started normally. Daniel had loaded in Fairbanks at 7 a.m., grabbed breakfast at the North Pole truck stop, and headed south under clear skies. November in Alaska meant short days, barely 6 hours of sunlight this far north. By the time Daniel crossed into Yukon territory at the border, it was already dark, the kind of complete darkness that only exists in the far north, where cities are hundreds of miles apart and light pollution is non-existent. Traffic on the Alaska Highway in November was minimal. Daniel had seen maybe 3 other vehicles since leaving Tok, a pickup truck heading north, an RV that was either brave or foolish to be traveling this late in the season, and a fuel tanker heading south like him. For the most part, it was just Daniel, his truck, and the endless ribbon of pavement cutting through the wilderness. Around 8 p.m., somewhere between Beaver Creek and Destruction Bay, Daniel noticed headlights in his mirrors. Not unusual, trucks ran this route at all hours. But these lights caught his attention because of how quickly they'd appeared. For a moment, his mirrors showed only darkness. The next, headlights were visible, maybe a quarter mile back, moving fast. Daniel was running at the speed limit, 90 kilometers per hour, about 55 miles per hour. The lights behind him were closing the distance rapidly. Daniel eased toward the shoulder slightly, giving the approaching vehicle room to pass. The Alaska Highway was mostly 2-lane through this section, but there was plenty of room for a safe pass. The vehicle didn't pass. It pulled up behind Daniel's trailer and matched his speed, settling in about 20 feet behind him, close enough to make Daniel uncomfortable. He could see in his mirrors that it was a truck, though the headlights were too bright to make out specific details. Daniel tried his CB radio. "Northbound truck on the Alaska Highway. You're running a bit close there, buddy." "Got plenty of room to pass." No response. The truck stayed locked in position behind him. Daniel sped up slightly, pushing to 100 kilometers per hour. The truck behind him matched his speed exactly, maintaining that same uncomfortable distance. Daniel slowed back to 90. So did the following truck. A prickle of unease ran down Daniel's spine. He'd dealt with aggressive drivers before, road ragers who tailgated to intimidate, but this felt different. The precision of it bothered him. The truck behind him wasn't just following, it was mirroring his speed with mechanical exactness. Daniel tried the CB again. "Come on, driver, back it off a bit, you're making me nervous." Static. But underneath the static, Daniel thought he heard something else. A voice, maybe distorted and distant. He turned up the volume, but the sound faded. For the next 20 minutes, the truck followed him with that same unwavering distance. Daniel tried every trick he knew. He sped up to 110, dropped to 80, varied his speed randomly. The truck behind him matched every change instantly. When Daniel tapped his brakes, the truck's headlights dipped as it braked at exactly the same moment. The next town, Destruction Bay, was still 40 kilometers ahead. The next place to pull over safely was a rest area in about 15 kilometers. Daniel considered just stopping on the highway, forcing the issue, but the Alaska Highway in November wasn't a place to play games. Black ice could form in minutes. Wildlife crossed without warning. Stopping unexpectedly could get both of them killed. He decided to wait for the rest area, let the other truck pass, and figure out what this guy's problem was face to face if necessary. Daniel had dealt with plenty of difficult people in his years on the road. He could handle one more. The rest area appeared in his headlights. A small pullout with a parking area, an outhouse, and some informational signs about the area. Daniel signaled, slowed, and pulled off the highway. The truck behind him followed him into the rest area. Daniel pulled to a stop at the far end of the parking area, set his brake, and watched his mirror. The other truck parked directly behind him, close enough that Daniel couldn't back up without hitting it. The headlights stayed on, bright and blinding. Daniel waited for the other driver to get out. Nobody emerged. The truck just sat there, engine running, lights blazing. After 5 minutes, Daniel's unease turned to anger. He grabbed his flashlight, pulled on his heavy coat, and climbed down from the cab. The November cold hit him immediately, probably negative 20 Celsius, cold enough that his breath crystallized instantly. "Hey," Daniel shouted, walking toward the other truck. "What's your problem?" The truck's headlights were so bright he had to shield his eyes. He couldn't see into the cab, couldn't see any detail of the truck beyond its basic shape. It was a semi, that much was clear, but the style, the color, the company markings, everything was washed out in the glare. Daniel walked right up to the driver's side door, raising his hand to knock on the window. His hand passed through empty air. There was no door, no window, just light, solid and impenetrable, shaped like a truck but made of nothing but illumination. Daniel stumbled backward, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, looked again. The truck was still there, still truck-shaped, but when he tried to focus on any specific detail, the hood, the grille, the wheels, his eyes couldn't quite lock onto anything solid. It was like trying to grab smoke. He ran back to his cab, climbed inside, and locked the doors with shaking hands. In his mirror, the truck of light sat motionless, its headlights boring into his trailer. Daniel tried to think rationally. Exhaustion, hallucination. Some kind of atmospheric phenomenon that was creating an optical illusion. But he'd been driving for only 13 hours. He wasn't tired. His coffee was fresh. He didn't use drugs, barely drank alcohol. There was no rational explanation. Daniel put his truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway, half expecting the light truck to block his path. It didn't move. He accelerated back to 90 kilometers per hour, watching his mirrors. The light truck sat in the rest area, motionless. Daniel felt a flood of relief. Whatever that had been, he'd left it behind. 10 kilometers down the road, the headlights reappeared in his mirrors. Same position, same distance behind him, as if the encounter had never happened. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. Fear was replacing confusion now, a deep primal fear that something fundamentally wrong was happening. He grabbed his CB mic. "Anyone on this channel, anyone, I need help. Alaska Highway southbound, kilometer marker." He checked his GPS. Marker 522. "Something S following me. Please respond." His own voice came back to him through the speaker, but wrong, backward. The words reversed, the syllables inverted. It sounded like he was speaking some alien language, every phoneme twisted into something unrecognizable. The light truck moved closer, now just 10 feet behind his trailer. Close enough that Daniel should have been able to see the truck's grille, its windshield, any identifying features. But there was nothing, just light shaped like a pursuing truck. Daniel pushed his speed to 120 kilometers per hour, faster than was safe on this dark highway. The light truck matched him effortlessly. He slowed to 60. It matched that too. He stopped in the middle of the highway, a dangerous, desperate move. The light truck stopped exactly 20 feet behind him, maintaining precise distance. A real truck, a tanker hauling fuel, came around the curve ahead. Its horn blared as it swerved to avoid Daniel's stopped truck. The tanker's headlights swept across the area behind Daniel's trailer as it passed. For just a moment, illuminated in those headlights, Daniel saw what was really behind him. It wasn't a truck. It was a shape, a void, a hole in reality shaped like a truck. Where the tanker's lights hit it, they didn't reflect. They disappeared, swallowed into absolute darkness. And in that darkness, Daniel saw faces, dozens of them, hundreds. Pressed against the inside of the shape like people trapped behind glass, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. Then the tanker was past, and the shape was bright headlights again, normal except for being completely impossible. Daniel accelerated, pushing his truck as fast as it would safely go on the dark highway. Destruction Bay was close now, maybe 15 kilometers. There'd be people there, other trucks, witnesses, help. He just had to make it that far. The temperature gauge on his dashboard began to drop. Outside temp, -23, -28, -35. Daniel turned up the cab heater, but frost was forming on the inside of his windows. He could see his breath, thick white clouds with every exhalation. The light truck moved closer, 5 feet behind him now. Close enough that Daniel should have heard its engine, should have felt its presence. But there was only silence and cold and those bright headlights. Destruction Bay appeared ahead, a scattering of lights in the darkness. Daniel had never been so happy to see that tiny settlement. He pulled off the highway into the parking lot of the Motor Inn, not bothering to signal, nearly sideswiping a parked pickup in his haste. The light truck followed him into the parking lot, followed him as he circled the building, followed him as he pulled to a stop near the front entrance, stopped exactly 20 feet behind him as always. Daniel ran from his cab to the inn's entrance, burst through the door into blessed warmth and light. There were people inside, a family eating dinner, the desk clerk, 2 men who looked like locals having coffee, normal people in a normal place. "There's something outside," Daniel gasped. "Behind my truck, something," the desk clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked past him through the window. "I don't see anything except your truck, honey. Look behind it, the headlights." She looked again, squinted. There's nothing there. Daniel turned. Through the window, he could see his truck clearly, parked and alone. No headlights behind it, no light truck, nothing but empty parking lot and darkness. "It was there," Daniel said weakly. "It followed me from Beaver Creek." The desk clerk's expression softened with understanding. "Long haul, coming from Fairbanks," Daniel nodded. "You're not the first driver to see strange things on that stretch. Something about the darkness, the isolation, plays tricks on your mind. You should rest, get some sleep. You'll feel better in the morning." Daniel wanted to argue, to insist that what he'd seen was real, but exhaustion was crashing over him in waves. Maybe she was right. Maybe his mind had conjured the whole thing. He rented a room, barely made it to the bed before sleep claimed him. He woke at 6 a.m. to pale sunlight and the sounds of trucks starting their engines outside. Daniel looked out his window. His truck was where he'd left it, normal and solid and real. No mysterious headlights. No shapes made of light and darkness. Daniel checked out, climbed into his cab, and continued south. Daylight made everything seem better, less threatening. He drove through Whitehorse, through Watson Lake, through the rest of Yukon and into British Columbia without incident. But 3 months later, running the same route north from Dawson Creek, Daniel found himself passing kilometer marker 522 as darkness fell, and in his mirrors, headlights appeared. Distant at first, then closer, settling into position exactly 20 feet behind his trailer. Daniel pulls over immediately now whenever he sees those lights, stops and waits, sometimes for hours until they disappear. He's learned that they always disappear eventually, back into whatever place they come from. But they also always return. Every trip north, somewhere on that dark highway, the light truck appears in his mirrors. Other drivers have started reporting the same thing. Headlights that follow too close, that can't be shaken off, that disappear when anyone else looks but are undeniably real to the driver being followed. The reports all come from the same stretch of highway, all from the same time of year, all describing the same impossible pursuit. Daniel still drives the Alaska Highway, but he refuses to run it in November anymore. Won't even consider it. He tells his dispatcher he has family obligations, seasonal maintenance, anything but the truth. Because he knows that if those headlights catch him again, if that thing made of light and darkness gets close enough, if the temperature drops far enough and the distance closes completely, he'll join the faces he saw trapped inside it. One more driver who disappeared on the Alaska Highway, one more person swallowed by the darkness between the settlements. The light truck is still there, still following, still hunting. And every driver who runs that route in the dark of winter knows, deep down, that eventually it might be their headlights appearing in someone else's mirror, their face pressed against the inside of that terrible void, silently screaming for a help that will never come. Story 5. The Backwards Highway. Thomas Reed had been an over-the-road driver for 23 years, and in that time he developed an almost supernatural ability to navigate without GPS. At 56, with a weathered face and hands calloused from decades of handling a steering wheel, he preferred the old ways, paper maps, road signs, and an internal compass built from millions of miles of experience. On March 3, 2022, driving from Nashville to Memphis on I-40, Thomas's confidence in his navigational abilities was shattered by a highway that shouldn't have existed. The day started unremarkably. Thomas had picked up a load of furniture in Nashville at 5 a.m., grabbed breakfast at the Petro, and merged onto I-40 westbound at 6:15. The weather was perfect, clear skies, temperature in the mid-50s, light traffic. Thomas settled into his seat, set his cruise control at 67 miles per hour, and prepared for the easy 3-hour run to Memphis. He'd driven I-40 through Tennessee hundreds of times, knew it like he knew his own driveway. The exits, the landmarks, the spots where cops like to hide with radar guns, all of it was cataloged in his mental. So when he passed the exit for Lebanon and the next exit sign read Cookeville 45 miles instead of Cookeville 32 miles, Thomas noticed immediately. He frowned, checked his mirrors, looked at the mile markers. He just passed marker 238. The distance to Cookeville was wrong by 13 miles. A misprint, probably. Happened sometimes. He made a mental note to report it and continued driving. 10 minutes later, he passed marker 245. According to his mental map, he should have been seeing signs for the rest area just west of Lebanon. Instead, he saw a sign for Lebanon itself, Lebanon 7 miles. But he'd already passed Lebanon 20 minutes ago. Thomas's frown deepened. He grabbed his atlas from the passenger seat, flipped to the Tennessee page, traced I-40 with his finger. Lebanon, then Cookville, then Crossville, then the Plateau. He was between Lebanon and Cookville. Had to be. But the signs insisted he was approaching Lebanon from the east as if he hadn't already driven through that section. Thomas checked his GPS. He kept one in the cab even though he rarely used it. The screen showed his truck as a blue dot on I-40, positioned exactly where the sign said he was, 7 miles east of Lebanon. But that was impossible. He'd already driven past Lebanon. He'd seen the exit, seen the truck stops, seen the familiar landmarks. He kept driving, convinced there was some glitch, some explanation. 7 miles later, the Lebanon exits appear. The exact same exits he'd passed half an hour ago. Same truck stops in the same positions. Same water tower visible in the distance. Thomas pulled off at the same exit he'd used earlier, pulled into the same pilot he'd passed before. The parking lot was arranged exactly as it had been. A Werner truck in spot 3, a CRSD in spot 7, a blue pickup near the entrance, the exact same vehicles in the exact same positions. Thomas checked his watch, 7:20 a.m. He'd passed this pilot at 6:30, 50 minutes ago. He parked, climbed down from his cab and walked into the truck stop. The same clerk was at the register, a young guy with a name tag that read Brandon. Thomas walked up to the counter. "Excuse me, what time did you start your shift?" Brandon looked confused by the question. 6 a.m. Why? I was here about an hour ago. Do you remember me? Brandon studied Thomas's face, shook his head. "Sorry, man, we get a lot of drivers. I don't really remember specific people." Thomas bought a coffee he didn't want and went back to his truck. He sat in the cab, drinking the coffee, trying to rationalize what was happening. Maybe he dozed off. Maybe he dreamed the earlier part of the drive. But he could remember it clearly. Every mile, every sign, every detail. He pulled up his truck's electronic logging device. The ELD tracked his movements automatically, recorded every mile driven. According to the log, he'd left Nashville at 6:15 and driven straight to this pilot in Lebanon, arriving at 7:20. No mention of passing Lebanon earlier. No record of the miles he clearly remembered driving. Thomas put his coffee in the cup holder and pulled back onto I-40 westbound. He drove carefully, watching every sign, every marker, every landmark. Cookville approached. He passed through it without incident, the city appearing exactly as it should. The Plateau climbed ahead of him. Crossville passed, everything normal. Then he saw the sign, Lebanon 45 miles. Thomas felt his stomach drop. No, not possible. He'd just driven through Lebanon an hour ago, and through Cookville and through Crossville. He declimbed the Plateau. He was west of Crossville, should be approaching the junction with I-40's western section. But the sign insisted he was approaching Lebanon from the west now, somehow having looped back. He kept driving. The miles counted down on the signs. Lebanon 30 miles, Lebanon 20 miles, Lebanon 7 miles. And then the exits appeared again, identical to before. The same pilot. The same Werner truck in spot 3, the same CRSD in spot 7, the same blue pickup. Thomas pulled in again, checked his watch, 8:50 a.m. He'd been driving for over 2.5 hours but had somehow ended up in the same place. He went into the truck stop. Brandon was still at the register. "What time is it?" Thomas asked. Brandon checked the clock on the wall, 8:50. "Do you remember me? I was just here." "Just here when?" "An hour and a half ago." Brandon shook his head. "Sorry, man, maybe I just don't remember." Thomas went back to his truck. He called his dispatcher. "Hey, it's Thomas. I'm having some kind of navigation issue. My GPS is acting weird." "What's the problem?" "I'm stuck in a loop or something. I keep ending up in Lebanon." "Lebanon, Tennessee? You should be almost to Memphis by now." "I know, but I keep..." "Never mind, I'll figure it out." Thomas ended the call. He sat in the pilot parking lot, watching other trucks come and go, all of them normal, all of them following normal routes to normal destinations. He was the only one caught in this impossible loop. He tried driving east back toward Nashville. Maybe if he reversed course, he could break out of whatever was happening. He merged onto I-40 eastbound. Nashville appeared in 78 miles to the signs. He drove for an hour watching the mile markers count down. 60 miles, 50 miles, 40 miles, then Lebanon 7 miles. Thomas wanted to scream. He was driving east now toward Nashville, but Lebanon was still ahead of him. A city he'd now approached from the west twice and the east once. A city that kept reappearing no matter which direction he drove. He pulled into the Pilot again. Brandon was gone, replaced by a different clerk, but the truck in spot 3 was still there. Still the same Werner semi that had been there hours ago. Thomas checked the truck's door. It was locked, no driver visible. He walked around it looking for any sign of the driver. Nothing. He checked the CRSD in spot 7. Also locked, also empty. The blue pickup near the entrance locked, empty. Thomas walked through the entire parking lot. Every vehicle was abandoned. The cars, the trucks, even a motorcycle near the fuel pumps, all empty, all locked, all looking like they'd been parked and then their drivers had simply vanished. Thomas ran into the truck stop. The new clerk, a woman in her 40s, looked up from her phone. "Where is everyone?" Thomas demanded. "What do you mean? The drivers, the other people. Every vehicle out there is empty." The clerk looked out the window, confused. "I don't know. People come and go. Maybe they're in the restaurant or the showers." Thomas checked. The restaurant had 4 people in it, all locals by the look of them, none of them truckers. The shower area was empty. The game room, the TV lounge, all empty. 20 vehicles in the parking lot and only 4 people in the entire facility besides Thomas and the clerk. He went back to his truck and sat with his head in his hands. The sun was setting now. Impossible, it should only be late morning, but the sky was definitely darkening. His watch read 5:30 p.m. He'd lost hours somehow. The ELD showed he'd been driving all day, logging hundreds of miles, but always in the same short stretch of I-40. Thomas decided to stop. Just stop. Pull into the Pilot parking lot and wait for morning. Wait for whatever this was to end. He climbed into his sleeper berth, set his alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep. He woke to sunlight. His alarm was beeping. 6 a.m. Thomas climbed into the driver's seat and looked out at the parking lot. The Werner truck was in spot 3, the CRSD in spot 7, the blue pickup near the entrance. He started his engine and pulled onto I-40 westbound, drove toward Memphis, watched the signs count down. Lebanon 45 miles, Lebanon 30 miles, Lebanon 20 miles. Thomas has been driving that loop for 3 years now. He pulls into the Lebanon Pilot, tries to sleep, wakes up and drives again. Sometimes he goes west, sometimes east, it doesn't matter. He always ends up back in Lebanon, always sees the same trucks in the same parking spots, always watches the sun set impossibly fast and rise again. His dispatcher stopped calling after the first week. His family reported him missing. The police found his truck in the Pilot parking lot in Lebanon, found it empty, doors locked, no sign of Thomas. They impounded it eventually, sold it at auction. But Thomas still drives it, still sees it in the parking lot every morning when he wakes, still climbs into the cab and takes to the highway, hoping this time will be different, hoping this time he'll break through to Memphis or back to Nashville or anywhere except this same endless loop of pavement between exits that shouldn't exist. Other drivers report seeing him sometimes, a ghost truck that appears in their mirrors on I-40 through Lebanon, matching their speed for a few miles before fading away. Some have even seen Thomas himself, looking through his windshield with desperate, haunted eyes, mouthing words they can't hear. The highway is still there, still carrying traffic, still functioning normally for everyone except Thomas. But somewhere in the space between mile markers, in the gap between Lebanon and Cookeville where reality bent wrong, Thomas Reed drives his eternal route, searching for an exit from a highway that loops back on itself forever, a road with no beginning, no end, and no escape. Story 6. The Static Conversation. Raymond Torres had been driving team operations for Covenant Transport for 8 years, but after his partner retired in January 2023, he'd requested solo runs. At 33, he appreciated the solitude, the freedom from having to coordinate sleep schedules and tolerate someone else's music choices. The solo life suited him. On February 17, 2023, running I-70 eastbound through Kansas with a load of industrial chemicals, Raymond discovered that being alone in his cab didn't necessarily mean being alone. The pickup in Denver had been straightforward. Hazmat cargo, properly placarded and secured, bound for a manufacturing facility in St. Louis. Raymond had all his certifications current, knew the regulations backward and forward, and had hauled hazmat dozens of times without incident. The load was secure, the weather was clear, and the route was one he'd driven many times before. Around 11 p.m., somewhere between Colby and Raymond's CB radio crackled to life. He'd had it on Channel 19 but hadn't heard any chatter for the last hour, not unusual for this stretch of Kansas at night. The farms and small towns were dark and sleeping, and traffic was sparse. Eastbound hauling chemicals, you got your ears on. The voice was male, middle-aged, with a slight southern accent. Raymond grabbed his mic. "Yeah, I copy. This is Nighthawk running I-70 East. What's your 20? About 2 miles behind you. Saw your hazmat placards. You running hot? Negative. Chemicals are stable ambient temperature. Just got to keep the speed smooth, no hard braking. 10-4, how's the road ahead? Clear and dry, light traffic, should be smooth sailing to Salina. Appreciate it, you running solo these days." Raymond felt a slight prickle of unease. How would this driver know he used to run team? "Yeah, for a couple months now, you know me. Heard you on the radio before. You used to run with Marcus, right?" "Martin." His name was Martin. The unease grew stronger. Raymond checked his mirrors but couldn't see any headlights behind him. The Kansas night was dark enough that he should have been able to see lights from 2 miles away. "Right, Martin. How's he doing?" "Retired, living in Florida now." Raymond kept scanning his mirrors, still no lights. "Hey, I don't see you back there. You running dark." A pause, static crackled through the speaker. "Sorry, what was that? You're breaking up." "I said I don't see your lights. Where are you exactly?" More static. "Then I'm right behind you, Nighthawk, about a quarter mile now." Raymond's hands tightened on the wheel. There were no lights behind him. He could see for miles in every direction. The Kansas prairie was flat and open, and his mirrors showed only empty highway illuminated by his own taillights. "I don't see you," Raymond said carefully. "No lights on my 6. "That's weird. I can see you clear as day. Red Freightliner, Covenant Transport, hazmat placards on both sides." Raymond felt cold spread through his chest. The description was accurate, too accurate. "What's your truck number?" Static. Long enough that Raymond thought the connection had been lost. Then, Unit 723, same as yours. "That's not possible, I'm in 723. "So am I, brother, so am I." Raymond grabbed his phone, pulled up the Covenant Transport tracking app. His truck, Unit 723, showed as a blue dot on I-70 eastbound, about 15 miles west of Waukene. One truck. One dot, not two. "Who is this?" Raymond demanded into the CB. "It's me, Raymond Torres, driving solo since January. Running chemicals to St. Louis, should arrive around 8 a.m. if I keep this pace." Raymond's arrival time was 8:15 a.m., close enough to "This isn't funny, get off this channel." "I'm not trying to be funny, I'm trying to figure out why you're in my truck." "I'm not in your truck, this is my truck. I've been driving it for 3 years." "So have I." Raymond switched off the CB. His heart was pounding, some kind of prank had to be. Another driver who'd somehow gotten his information was messing with him. But how would they know about Martin? How would they know the exact truck number? The CB crackled back to life even though Raymond had turned it off. The voice continued as if there had been no interruption. "Turning it off won't help. We're connected now." Raymond stared at the CB. The power light was off. The unit was definitely not on. But the voice kept coming through, clear despite the underlying static. "What do you want?" Raymond asked, not keying the mic, just speaking into the air. "I want to understand what's happening, same as you. You're not real, you're some kind of hallucination. If I'm not real, how do I know you've got a scar on your right forearm, shaped like a crescent moon? Got it when you were 12, fell off your bike onto a broken bottle." Raymond looked down at his forearm. The scar was there, visible in the dashboard lights. An injury from 21 years ago that he rarely thought about. How? Because I have the same scar, same injury, same memory of your mom driving you to the emergency room, yelling at you for being careless. Stop it. I'm not trying to scare you, I'm trying to make you understand. I think I'm you, or you're me, or we're both something else. Raymond drove in silence, listening to the hum of his engine, the whisper of tires on pavement. The voice on the CB waited patiently. Okay, Raymond finally said. If you're me, prove it. Tell me something nobody else would know. The night before your wedding, you almost didn't go through with it. You sat in your car outside the church for 2 hours, convincing yourself it was the right choice. Raymond's blood ran cold. He never told anyone about that. Not his wife, not his friends, not Martin. It was a private moment of doubt he'd buried and tried to forget. You did go through with it, the voice continued. Got married, had 3 good years before she left. The divorce finalized in 2019. You threw yourself into work after that, took every long haul you could get, anything to avoid going home to an empty apartment. How are you in my head? I'm not in your head, I'm in my truck, Unit 723, driving the same route you're driving, having the same conversation you're having. That doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. But it's happening anyway. Raymond checked his mirrors again, still no lights. The Kansas prairie stretched empty in all directions. If you're real, where are you physically? I-70 eastbound, same place as you. But I don't see you. Maybe you're not looking in the right place. Maybe I'm not behind you, maybe I'm beside you. Raymond glanced to his left, to the westbound lanes, empty. Glanced right, nothing but shoulder and prairie grass. Not beside in space, the voice said. Beside in something else. Time maybe, or dimension, I don't know the right word. You're saying you're in a parallel universe or something. Maybe, or maybe we split somehow. One person became 2, or 2 became 1 and we're the remnants, I don't know. Raymond drove past the Waukene exit. The town's lights were visible to the north, normal and solid. In his world at least, everything was still functioning normally. Tell me about your day, the voice said. From the beginning. Raymond described his morning, waking at 4 a.m. in the Denver motel, the breakfast at IHOP, the load inspection and paperwork at the chemical plant, the departure at 7 a.m. As he talked, the voice occasionally interjected with same here or me too, or once disturbingly, that's where we diverged. What do you mean diverged? The IHOP. I got the pancake combo, what did you get? Eggs and bacon. That's it, that's where we split. I ordered pancakes, you ordered eggs. Different choices, different timelines. That's insane. You can't create alternate realities based on breakfast choices. Why not? If every choice creates a branching path, why not that one? Raymond had no answer. They drove in silence for several minutes, both of them apparently approaching haze from opposite directions or different dimensions or whatever impossible circumstance was allowing this conversation. Are you afraid? The voice asked. Yes. Me too. I've been hearing voices on the CB for 3 days now. Different voices, different conversations, all claiming to be me, all driving the same routes. You're the first one who's talked back. 3 days, started on the 15th, day after Valentine's Day. I was running a load from Phoenix to Denver. Heard myself on the radio having a conversation with another trucker. But I wasn't having that conversation. I was just listening to it, to myself. Talking about a route I'd driven, a dinner I'd eaten, a motel I'd stayed in. All accurate, all real, but I wasn't the one saying it. Raymond felt a horrible suspicion forming. What happened on the 15th, besides hearing voices? Nothing, normal day, normal drive. Why? Because today is the 17th. You've been hearing voices for 3 days, but I'm just hearing you now for the first time. So maybe I'm one of your voices. Maybe 3 days ago you split. And I'm the branch that doesn't know it yet. Silence from the CB. Long enough that Raymond thought the connection had truly died. Then quietly, or you're the original and I'm the branch. Does it matter? I don't know, maybe. They passed Hayes without incident. Raymond fueled at a Love's truck stop, watching his mirrors the whole time, looking for any sign of another truck that matched his own. Nothing. The voice stayed with him, though, commenting on the fuel price, asking if Raymond had grabbed coffee, mentioning that the attendant was friendly. "Can you see me?" Raymond asked. "When I'm outside the truck?" "No, I just know. I know what you're doing because I'm doing it too, or I did it, or I will do it. The timing is confusing." Back on the highway, approaching Selena, the voice said something that made Raymond's blood freeze. "There's going to be an accident ahead. Mile marker 212. A four-wheeler crossed the median, hit a swift truck head-on, both drivers killed. Traffic backed up for 6 hours. When? Tomorrow, February 18th, around 3 a.m. How do you know? Because I was there. I sat in the backup for 6 hours, watched them cut the bodies out of the wreckage. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen." Raymond checked his GPS. Mile marker 212 was 40 miles ahead. "Should I warn someone?" "Who?" "The police." "And tell them what?" "That a voice on your CB told you about an accident that hasn't happened yet. They'll think you're insane." "What should I do?" "I don't know. I couldn't stop it. I was there, saw it happen, and couldn't do anything. Maybe you can. Maybe that's why we're talking. Maybe you're the branch that prevents it." Raymond drove faster, pushing to 75, then 80. The mile markers counted up. 190, 200, 210. He came around a curve and saw brake lights ahead. A long line of them stretching into the distance. "No," Raymond whispered. He slowed, pulled to a stop behind a line of halted traffic. In the distance, visible in the darkness, were the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Raymond grabbed his phone, checked the time. 2:58 a.m., February 18th. "I'm here," he said to the CB. "The accident, it already happened, or it's happening now." "What do you mean? It shouldn't happen until 3 a.m. It's 2:58. I'm looking at the emergency lights right now." That's not how it happened for me. For me, it was 3:15 when I got to the scene." "Well, for me it's now." Raymond sat in the traffic backup, feeling the weight of futility. He hadn't prevented anything, hadn't changed anything. The accident had happened just as the voice had described, just slightly earlier in his timeline than in the other Raymond's timeline. Unless, what if it's not about preventing the accident? Raymond said slowly. What if it's about making different choices after? What do you mean? You said we split over a pancake versus an egg, tiny choices creating different branches. What if every moment is a branching point? What if right now in this traffic backup we're splitting again? You made one choice in this moment, I can make a different one. What choice did I make? You waited 6 hours. What if I do? Raymond checked his GPS. There was an exit half a mile back, a county road that paralleled the interstate. He could backtrack on the shoulder, take that exit, bypass the accident on back roads. It would add time to his trip, maybe miss his delivery window, but it would be a different choice than the other Raymond had made. Don't, the voice said urgently. If you make a different choice, what? I'll split further, create another branch. I'm already a branch, apparently. What difference does it make? I don't know what happens if we diverge too far. We're connected now, I can feel it. If you make too many different choices, we might separate completely. Maybe that's good. Maybe we're supposed to separate. Or maybe we're supposed to merge. Maybe all the branches are supposed to find their way back together. Raymond sat with his hands on the wheel, engine idling, staring at the emergency lights in the distance. A choice point. Wait or go. Follow the path the other Raymond had taken or create a new branch. He thought about his life, the divorce, the empty apartment, the endless highway stretching ahead with no destination except the next delivery, the next paycheck, the next truck stop. A life that felt more like a loop than a journey. I'm going to wait, Raymond said finally. I'm going to sit here for 6 hours, same as you did. Watch them clear the wreckage, make the same choice. Why? Because maybe you're right. Maybe we're supposed to merge. And maybe the only way to do that is to make the same choices, walk the same path, become the same person again. Or maybe you'll just spend 6 hours in a traffic jam for nothing. Maybe, but at least I won't be alone. Raymond sat in the backup. The voice stayed with him, talking through the long hours, sharing observations about the emergency workers, the other delayed drivers, the slow process of clearing the wreckage. Two Raymond Torreses occupying the same space in different spaces, living parallel lives that had diverged over breakfast and were trying desperately to converge again. By 8 a.m., the road was clear. Raymond merged back onto I-70, running late but still moving. The voice was quieter now, saying less, the static growing thicker. "Are you still there?" Raymond asked. "Yeah, but you're fading, or I'm fading. The connection isn't as strong." "What does that mean?" I think maybe we're merging, becoming one person again. Or maybe I was never real. Maybe you a thing. You were real, are real. Maybe." The voice was very faint now, almost lost in static. "Or maybe I'm just the part of you that wonders what would have happened if you'd ordered pancakes instead of eggs. The part that second guesses every choice. The part that sits in cars outside churches wondering if you're making a mistake. Don't go. I don't think I have a choice. Good luck, Raymond. I hope you make it to St. Louis. I hope you find whatever you're looking for out there on the highway." The static swallowed the voice completely. Raymond tried calling out, tried raising a response, but the CB was silent. He switched it off and on again. Nothing. Just the normal chatter of Channel 19, weather reports, directions, the mundane conversations of drivers living single, unsplintered lives. Raymond delivered his load to St. Louis on time, took another run back west, then another east. The voice never returned. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, Raymond wonders if somewhere in another branch, another version of himself is driving the same roads, making different choices, living a different life. And he wonders if that other Raymond ordered pancakes instead of eggs, and if that small choice made any difference at all in the end. The CB crackles with static sometimes, and Raymond listens carefully, hoping to hear himself on the other end, hoping for proof that the conversation was real and not just the product of exhaustion and isolation. But the static remains empty, and Raymond drives on alone, making choices that may or may not be branching him further from or closer to the person he might have been. Story 7. The Passenger Seat. William Cross had been driving for Swift Transportation for 4 years when his wife Margaret passed away from cancer in August 2021. At 47 years old, recently widowed and struggling with grief, he threw himself into his work, taking every available run, driving as many miles as regulations allowed. His truck became his refuge, the highway his therapy. On October 29, 2021, driving from Salt Lake City to Boise with a load of electronics, William discovered he wasn't driving alone. The day had been difficult from the start. October 29th was Margaret's birthday. She would have been 46. William had woken in his motel room to the crushing awareness of the date, had seriously considered calling in sick, but ultimately decided that driving was better than sitting alone with his thoughts. He picked up the load at 7 a.m. and headed north on I-15, deliberately not thinking about birthday presents or the way Margaret used to smile when she opened gifts. By the time he merged onto I-84 north of Tremonton, heading toward Idaho, William's mind had achieved the blank meditative state that long-haul drivers know well. Empty mind, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, not thinking, just driving. Then he saw her. Margaret was sitting in the passenger seat. William jerked the wheel instinctively, nearly putting his truck into the ditch before he regained control. He looked again. The passenger seat was empty. Of course it was empty. He was alone in the cab, had been alone since Margaret died 2 months ago. He took a shaky breath, gripped the steering wheel harder. Grief hallucination. He'd read about it online. The mind seeing what it desperately wanted to see. Perfectly normal, if unsettling. 10 miles later, she was there again. This time, William didn't jerk the wheel. He just stared. Margaret sat in the passenger seat as solid and real as she'd been in life, wearing the blue sweater he'd bought her for Christmas 3 years ago. Her hair was pulled back the way she used to wear it. She was looking out the window at the passing landscape, her expression peaceful. "You're not real," William said aloud. Margaret turned to look at him, smiled. "I know." Her voice. God, her voice. Exactly as he remembered it. Soft, slightly hoarse from all the years she'd smoked before quitting. William felt tears welling up. "You can't be here, you died. I was at the funeral, I scattered your ashes." "I know that too." Margaret settled back in her seat, still smiling that gentle smile. "But I'm here anyway, for today at least." "Why today?" "It's my birthday, you remembered." "Of course I remembered." "And you're sad, I can feel it. All that sadness weighing on you. I thought maybe I could help." William drove in silence, trying to process what was happening. Part of his brain insisted this was impossible, that he needed to pull over, call someone, seek help. But another part, the part that had spent 2 months in crushing loneliness, didn't want to question it, didn't want her to disappear. "How are you doing?" Margaret asked. "Really doing?" "I'm managing, driving helps, keeps my mind occupied." "You're running yourself ragged, I can see it in your face. You're not sleeping enough." "Probably not eating right." "I'm fine." "William." She said his name the way she used to when she knew he was lying, gentle but firm. "You don't have to pretend with me." The tears came then, and William couldn't stop them. He pulled onto the shoulder, put the truck in park, and cried with his head against the steering wheel. He felt Margaret's hand on his shoulder, warm and solid and impossibly real. "I miss you so much," William choked out. "Every day, every single day." "I know, I miss you too." "Fair. We were supposed to have more time. You were supposed to beat it." "I know." They sat on the shoulder for 20 minutes while William cried and Margaret held him, her hand steady on his shoulder. Eventually, the tears stopped. William wiped his face with his sleeve, took a deep breath. "I should keep driving, got a delivery deadline." "Then let's drive, I'll keep you company." William pulled back onto I-84 and Margaret settled into her seat. For the next hour, they talked. About nothing important. About the weather, the landscape, the way the afternoon light looked on the mountains. Normal conversation, the kind they'd had 1,000 times during the years of their marriage, when Margaret would sometimes ride along on his shorter routes. "Do you remember that trip we took to Yellowstone?" Margaret asked. "Of course, best vacation we ever had. You got lost trying to find that campground." "I didn't get lost. The map was wrong." "You're always blaming the map." Margaret laughed, that warm, familiar sound that William had thought he'd never hear again. They reminisced about their wedding, about their honeymoon in Mexico, about the house they'd bought in Provo that had needed so much work, about their lives together, the good and the bad, the fights and the making up, the quiet evenings watching TV and the adventures they'd managed to squeeze in between William's driving schedule. "Do you regret it?" William asked. "Marrying a truck driver. I was gone so much." "Never. Not for a second. I should have been home more, especially at the end. You were home when it mattered. You were there when I needed you. I wish I could have saved you." Margaret reached over and took his hand. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. "You can't save everyone, William. Sometimes people just leave. It's not your fault." They drove through the afternoon, through the high desert of southern Idaho, Margaret pointing out landmarks and wildlife, commenting on other trucks, making jokes about the billboards. Normal, easy. As if death hadn't separated them, as if she were still alive and they were just taking a drive together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Margaret grew quieter. William noticed but didn't comment, didn't want to acknowledge what he suspected was coming. "I have to go soon," Margaret said finally. "No, not yet. Stay longer." "I can't. I'm not really here, William. You know that." "I don't care. Real or not, I need you." "You don't. You think you do, but you don't. You're strong. You've always been strong." "I'm not. Without you, You're still William Cross, still the man I fell in love with, still the best driver Swift has, still stubborn and kind and brave." "I don't feel brave." "Brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and going on anyway. You're doing that. Every day you're doing that." The truck stopped and home appeared ahead. William pulled off the interstate without planning to, following some instinct. The parking lot was half full, other trucks settling in for the night. William found a spot and shut off the engine. "Is this where we say goodbye?" he asked. "This is where you start letting go." "I don't know how." Yes, you do. You've been doing it for 2 months, little by little. It hurts and it's slow, but you're doing it. William looked at her, really looked. In the fading light, he could see that she wasn't quite solid anymore. The setting sun was visible through her, painting her in translucent gold. I love you, William said. I'll always love you. I know, and I love you, but love doesn't mean holding on forever. Sometimes love means letting go. Will I see you again? I don't know, maybe, or maybe this is it. Either way, you'll be okay. I don't want to be okay without you. I know, but you will be anyway. Margaret leaned over and kissed him. Her lips were warm and soft and tasted like the strawberry lip balm she'd always used. Live, William, don't just survive. Live for both of us. The sun slipped below the horizon. In the sudden dimness, Margaret faded like she was made of evening light, her shape becoming indistinct, her features blurring. William reached for her, but his hand passed through empty air. Margaret, but she was gone. The passenger seat was empty, just worn upholstery and a coffee stain from 3 weeks ago. No warmth, no impression, no sign that anyone had been sitting there. William sat alone in the dark cab, listening to the cooling engine tick, the distant sounds of other trucks and travelers. He waited, hoping she'd reappear, hoping he'd see her one more time. But the seat stayed empty. Eventually, William climbed into his sleeper berth. He didn't sleep much, couldn't stop thinking about the afternoon, about Margaret, about whether any of it had been real or if he'd hallucinated the entire thing. In the morning, he almost convinced himself it had been a dream, a vivid, grief-fueled dream and nothing more. But when he got back in the driver's seat to continue to Boise, he found something on the passenger seat. A wild flower, purple and small, the kind that grew along the Idaho highways. The kind Margaret used to pick during their drives together. William picked it up with shaking hands. It was real, solid. He hadn't put it there, couldn't have put it there. The truck had been locked all night. He tucked the flower into his sun's visor and drove to Boise, made his delivery, took another load, continued driving. The flower dried and faded but stayed in his visor, a reminder of an impossible afternoon spent with his wife on what should have been her 46th birthday. William still drives for Swift, still long hauls across the western states. He's never seen Margaret again, never heard her voice or felt her hand on his shoulder. But sometimes, on difficult days when the grief feels particularly heavy, he finds wildflowers on his passenger seat, purple or yellow or white, always the kinds Margaret used to love. He doesn't try to explain them, doesn't analyze or question. He just tucks them into his visor with the others, adds them to the small collection of impossible flowers, and drives on. The passenger seat stays empty, but William doesn't feel quite as alone anymore. He's learned what Margaret tried to teach him that October afternoon, that love doesn't end with death, that sometimes the people we lose find ways to reach back across whatever divide separates the living and the dead, and that grief and healing can coexist, can ride side by side in the same truck, traveling the same road toward whatever destination waits at the journey's end. Story 8. The Mile THAT End. Carlos Mendez had been a dedicated employee of J.B. Hunt for 11 years, maintaining a spotless safety record and a reputation for reliability that had earned him premium routes and regular bonuses. At 38, he was a professional in every sense, meticulous about his logs, careful with his loads, and precise in his driving. On April 4, 2020, running southbound on Highway 99 through California's Central Valley with a load of agricultural equipment, Carlos encountered a single mile of highway that refused to end. The run from Sacramento to Bakersfield was one Carlos had driven at least 50 times. He knew every town, every truck stop, every speed trap along the route. It was an easy run, straight shot down Highway 99, roughly 4 hours in normal traffic. He'd loaded at dawn in Sacramento, grabbed breakfast at a Denny's, and hit the highway by 8 a.m., expecting to deliver in Bakersfield before noon. The morning was unremarkable. Traffic flowed normally through the agricultural heartland of California, orchards and fields stretching to the horizons, small towns appearing and disappearing, the familiar rhythm of the Central Valley. Carlos listened to a podcast about true crime, sipped his coffee, and maintained a steady 68 miles per hour. At 9:45 a.m., Carlos passed mile marker 147, noting it automatically as drivers do, keeping track of progress without consciously thinking about it. The next marker should have been 146, down as he traveled south. 1 minute later, he passed mile marker 147 again. Carlos frowned, glanced in his mirror. He'd definitely passed that marker. He'd seen it clearly. But there it was again, the same green sign with the same number. Déjà vu, he told himself. Or maybe he'd misread the first marker. He continued driving, watching for the next one. Mile marker 147 appeared 30 seconds later. Carlos's frown deepened. 3 times. He passed the same marker 3 times in less than 2 minutes. That wasn't déjà vu. That was impossible. He checked his GPS. Screen showed his truck as a blue dot on Highway 99, positioned between markers 147 and 146, moving steadily south at 68 miles per hour. Normal. Everything looked normal on the screen, but the mile markers told a different story. 147, again, and again. Every 30 to 40 seconds, the same marker flashed past. Carlos slowed to 50 miles per hour. If he was somehow going in circles, driving slower might help him figure out how. But the highway stretched straight ahead, perfectly straight, disappearing into the haze of distance. No curves, no turns, no way to be driving in a circle. Mile marker 147, mile marker 147, mile marker 147. Carlos grabbed his phone, called his dispatcher. "Hey, Elena, it's Carlos. I'm having a weird situation here." "What kind of situation?" I think my odometer might be broken, or the mile markers are wrong. I keep passing the same marker over and over." "Which marker?" 147 on Highway 99. "I've passed it maybe 10 times now." A pause. "Carlos, have you been drinking?" "What? No, I'm serious. Something's wrong. The mile marker keeps repeating." "Are you feeling okay? Maybe you should pull over, take a break." "I'm fine. I'm wide awake. I'm telling you, the mile isn't ending. I keep passing the same marker." "Your GPS shows you're moving normally. Making good time, actually." "You're almost to Fresno." "I'm not almost to Fresno. I'm stuck at mile marker 147. "Carlos, the tracker says." "I don't care what the tracker says. I'm telling you what I'm seeing." Okay, calm down. Pull over at the next exit and we'll figure this out." Carlos looked for an exit. The highway stretched ahead with no exits visible, just the endless straight line of pavement and the agricultural fields on either side. According to his mental map, there should have been an exit for Madera in about 2 miles. But he'd been driving for 10 minutes now, had passed the same mile marker at least 20 times as it had appeared. "There's no exit," Carlos said into the phone. "There has to be an exit eventually. Just keep driving," and the call dropped. Carlos looked at his phone. No signal. Full bars a second ago, now nothing. He tried calling back. The call wouldn't connect. He tried 911. Same thing. The phone showed a strong signal but couldn't complete any calls. Mile marker 147 slipped past again. Carlos counted. 37 seconds later, there it was again. He was passing it roughly every 35 to 40 seconds, which meant he was traveling about half a mile and then somehow ending up back at the beginning of that same mile. But the highway never curved, never turned, just ran straight south. Carlos tried the radio, static on every station. He tried his CB. Static there too, with an underlying hum that rose and fell in a pattern that almost sounded like voices but wasn't quite coherent enough to understand. The landscape began to change. Subtle at first, a tree that seemed to be in a slightly different position. A barn that looked a bit older, a bit more faded. The fields were the same, but the crops looked different. Corn instead of almonds, or maybe lettuce instead of corn. Carlos couldn't quite pin it down. Every time he passed through that mile, small details were different. He started cataloging them. First pass, red barn on the right. Second pass, barn is brown. Third pass, no barn at all, just an empty field. Fourth pass, barn is there again but oriented differently. The changes were random, inconsistent, as if reality was shuffling the details every time he looped through. Carlos tried different speeds, drove at 75, then 50, then 40. The time it took to traverse the mile changed, but he always ended up back at marker 147. Tried pulling onto the shoulder and stopping completely. Sat there for 5 minutes, then pulled back onto the highway. Within a minute of driving, there was marker 147 again. The sun climbed toward noon. Carlos had been trapped in this mile for over 2 hours now. His fuel gauge, which had shown 3/4 of a tank when he entered the mile, was dropping. Quarter tank now. The truck was consuming fuel normally, but he wasn't making any progress. Other vehicles appeared occasionally. A pickup truck would pass in the opposite lane, heading north. A car would overtake him. But when Carlos tried to flag them down, waving frantically through his window, they didn't seem to see him. The drivers looked straight ahead, oblivious, and drove past as if he weren't there. By 1 p.m., Carlos was panicking. His fuel gauge showed less than 1/8 of a tank. If he ran out of fuel in this impossible mile, what would happen? Would he be stuck here forever? He tried driving backwards, put the truck in reverse and backed slowly down the shoulder, watching for the mile marker to appear behind him. It didn't. He backed for what felt like at least a mile, but no markers appeared in either direction. When he put the truck back in drive and proceeded forward, he was at mile marker 147 within seconds. The landscape was changing more dramatically now. The fields were different colors. The sky was shifting between clear blue and overcast gray. Once, for a 30-second period, it was raining heavily, water sheeting down his windshield. Then the sun was back, the pavement completely dry as if the rain had never happened. Carlos saw a gas station that hadn't been there before. It appeared on the right side of the highway, a small independent station with old-fashioned pumps and a hand-painted sign. He pulled in desperately, needing fuel, needing to talk to another human being. The station was abandoned. Pumps rusted and broken, windows of the building boarded up, weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. But it had looked open and operational from the highway. Carlos got out and approached the building. Through gaps in the boards, he could see the interior, shelves stocked with products, lights on as if people had just stepped out. He tried the door, locked, pounded on it. No response. Went back to his truck and continued driving. When he looked in his mirror, the gas station was gone. Just empty field where it had been. The sun began to set. Impossible, it should only be early afternoon. But the sky was definitely darkening, long shadows stretching across the fields. Carlos had been trapped for nearly 9 hours. His fuel gauge showed empty, the warning light glowing bright red. But the truck kept running, kept moving, as if fuel no longer mattered in this strange mile. Night fell completely. The highway was dark except for Carlos's headlights cutting through the blackness. Mile marker 147 appeared in his lights again and again, its reflective surface glinting mockingly. Carlos was exhausted, terrified. He considered just stopping, turning off the truck, trying to sleep, hoping he'd wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But some deep instinct told him that stopping permanently would be a mistake, that as long as he kept moving, he had a chance. Around midnight, or what Carlos's watch claimed was midnight, though he'd lost all sense of actual time, he saw headlights ahead. A truck coming toward him in the opposite lane. Carlos flashed his lights frantically, laid on his horn. The truck flashed back, slowed, pulled onto the shoulder. Carlos scrambled out of his cab. The other driver was getting out too, a woman, maybe 50, wearing a J.B. Hunt uniform identical to his own. "Thank God," Carlos gasped. "I've been stuck here for hours. I keep passing the same mile marker. I can't get out." The woman stared at him with wide eyes. "Me too. Mile marker 147. I've been trapped since this morning." "What's happening? What is this?" "I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out. I thought maybe I was hallucinating, but if you're seeing it too..." They compared notes. She de-entered the mile from the north, heading south just like Carlos. She'd been trapped for roughly the same amount of time. Every detail of her experience matched his: the changing landscape, the fuel that ran out but kept the engine running, the inability to contact anyone. "Have you tried walking?" she asked. "Getting out and just walking away from the truck?" "No, I was afraid to leave it." "Me too, but maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe the trucks are the problem." They decided to try it together. Left both trucks parked on the shoulder with their hazards flashing and started walking south along the highway. Felt good to stretch his legs after so many hours in the cab. The woman introduced herself as Patricia, said she'd been driving for J.B. Hunt for 6 years, lived in Modesto. They walked for what Carlos estimated was about a mile. No mile marker appeared. They kept walking. Another mile, still no marker. The highway stretched endlessly ahead and behind with no features except the pavement and the empty fields. "Should we turn back?" Patricia asked. "To what?" "The trucks are gone." Carlos turned. Patricia did too. The highway behind them was empty. Both trucks had disappeared. They were alone on an infinite road with no landmarks, no lights, nothing except asphalt and darkness. "We keep walking," Carlos said, trying to sound confident. "We have to reach something eventually." They walked for hours, or what felt like hours. Time was unreliable here. The sky never lightened toward dawn. Carlos's watch stopped working, hands frozen at 12:07 a.m. Patricia's phone was dead, wouldn't turn on. Eventually, they saw lights ahead, a truck parked on the shoulder. As they got closer, Carlos felt his stomach drop. It was his truck. His exact truck, same license plate, same small dent in the fender from a loading dock incident 6 months ago. Patricia walked to the other truck parked behind it. "This is mine." We walked in a circle. The highway was straight. We walked straight. We couldn't have circled back. But they had. The mile had looped them back to the beginning. Carlos climbed into his truck. The keys were in the ignition, right where he'd left them. Patricia, hers. Through the windshield, Carlos could see her face, pale and frightened in the dashboard lights. He started his engine. She did the same. Without discussing it, they pulled back onto the highway and started driving. Together now, her truck following his through the impossible mile. Mile marker 147 appeared, again and again. But something was different this time. Carlos noticed it on the third pass. The marker looked older. The numbers were faded, harder to read. By the 10th pass, the post was rusted, leaning at an angle. By the 20th, the marker was nearly illegible. The landscape was degrading too. The fields looked abandoned, overgrown. Buildings that had been intact were now collapsing. The road surface was cracking, potholes forming. Carlos realized what was happening. The mile was wearing out, aging. Every loop was deteriorating the reality of this place, grinding it down through repetition. He drove faster, so did Patricia. They pushed to 80, then 90. The mile markers flashed past more quickly. 147, 147, 147, but each repetition showed more decay. The marker fell over completely. The pavement turned to gravel, then to dirt. The fields became desert. The sky turned gray, then white, then a void of nothing. One final pass through the mile and everything was gone. No road, no fields, no sky, just whiteness. Carlos felt his truck dissolving beneath him, the metal and glass fading like mist. He saw Patricia's truck doing the same, her face visible through the disappearing windshield, mouthing words he couldn't hear. Then Carlos was standing on Highway 99 in bright daylight, blinking in the sun. Traffic flowed past normally. His truck was parked on the shoulder, engine running. He checked his watch, 9:46 a.m. 1 minute after he'd first entered the mile. His phone rang. Elena, the dispatcher. "Carlos, you still there?" Call dropped. I'm here. "You said something about a mile marker." "I never mind, everything's fine, just a weird moment, I'm good now." Carlos pulled back onto the highway. Mile marker 146 appeared ahead. He passed it and nearly cried with relief when 145 appeared 30 seconds later. Normal. Sequential. Real. He never saw Patricia again. Search for her later. J.B. Hunt had no driver by that name, no woman matching her description, no record of another truck being trapped with him. Carlos completed the run to Bakersfield, delivered his load on time. And now, whenever he drives Highway 99, he approaches mile marker 147, hands tight on the wheel, his foot ready to accelerate, praying that this time will be normal, that this time the mile will end the way miles are supposed to end, with the next number in sequence, with continued progress south, with confirmation that reality is still functioning according to its established rules, and that he won't be trapped again in that deteriorating loop, where distance has no meaning and highways fold back on themselves like impossible geometry. Story 9. The Way Station. Gregory Hammond had been driving for Schneider National for 19 years, specializing in heavyweight loads that required special permits and meticulous weight distribution. At 53 years old, with gray hair and reading glasses he only wore when checking his logs, he was an expert in weight regulations, knew every way station along his regular routes, and had never received a single overweight citation. On June 15, 2019, running I-80 eastbound through Nebraska with a permitted load of construction equipment, Gregory pulled into a way station that rewrote the rules of weight and measurement. The load was legitimate, 64,000 pounds of excavation equipment, properly permitted for 80,000 total gross weight including the tractor and trailer. Gregory had the permits in his folder, had checked and rechecked the weight distribution, and knew he was legal. When the All Trucks Must Enter sign lit up at the I-80 way station near Grand Island, he pulled off without concern. The facility looked standard, a modern building with several scale lanes, a parking area for vehicles selected for inspection, and the usual signage about regulations and fines. Gregory guided his truck onto the scale in lane 2, set his brakes, and waited for the light to signal whether he should proceed or pull into the inspection area. The light turned red. Pull forward for inspection. Gregory sighed. Random inspection, probably. Time-consuming but routine. He pulled into the designated parking area and shut off his engine. A DOT officer emerged from the building, a man in his 30s wearing the standard uniform, clipboard in hand. "Morning," the officer said. "License and registration, please. Bill of lading and permits, too." Gregory handed over the documents through his window. The officer reviewed them, his expression neutral and professional. "Says here you're permitted for 80,000 total. We're showing you at 106,000 on the scale." Gregory's stomach dropped. "That's not possible. I had this load weighed at the shipper. 64 pounds of cargo plus my truck at about 16,000. Should be exactly 80,000 total, well under the permitted amount." "Well, our scale disagrees. You're 26,000 pounds over your permitted weight. Your scale is malfunctioning. There's no way I've gained 26,000 pounds since loading." The officer's expression didn't change. "Scale was calibrated this morning. You'll need to move some cargo or face substantial fines." "I can't move cargo. It's secured and sealed. The seals are documented. Breaking them will void my delivery contract." "Then you'll need to pay the fine. 26,000 pounds over permitted weight is, let me calculate, that's $4,700. Gregory felt heat rising in his face. "I want to dispute this. I want another way. I want to see your calibration records." "You can dispute at the office. But you're not leaving until this is resolved." Gregory climbed down from his cab and followed the officer into the way station building. Inside, it looked like every other way station office he'd seen. Desks with computers, filing cabinets, coffee maker, bulletin boards covered with regulations and safety posters. Normal except for one detail. Every clock on the wall showed a different time. Gregory noticed but didn't comment, focused on fighting the bogus weight reading. The officer led him to a desk where another DOT employee, a woman with severe features and hard eyes, was working on a computer. "This driver is disputing the weight reading," the first officer said. The woman looked up at Gregory. "What's the dispute? Your scale says I'm at 106,000 pounds. I'm actually at 80,000. 26,000-pound discrepancy. Your scale is broken." "Our scale is functioning properly. Would you like to see the calibration certificate?" "Yes." She pulled a document from a file and handed it to him. The certificate looked official, dated that morning, signed by a certified technician, everything in order, except the weight listed as the calibration standard was wrong. It said the scale had been tested using a 15,000-pound weight, but the reading recorded was 23,000 pounds. "This proves the scale is wrong," Gregory said, pointing at the numbers. "You calibrated with 15,000 pounds, but the scale read 23. That's an 8,000-pound error right there." The woman looked at the certificate. "Those are the correct readings. 15,000 pounds calibration weight, 15,000 pound scale reading." Gregory looked again. The numbers had changed. Now the document clearly showed 15,000 for both the calibration weight and the reading. He could have sworn it said something different a second. Can I use your bathroom?" Gregory asked, needing a moment to think. "Down the hall, second door on the right." Gregory walked down the hallway, his mind racing. Something was profoundly wrong with this place. The clocks showing different times, the numbers changing on the document. This wasn't just a malfunctioning scale. This was something else. He found the bathroom, went inside and splashed cold water on his face, looked at himself in the mirror. His reflection looked back, but something was off. His reflection's lips were moving, saying words that Gregory wasn't saying. He stepped closer to the mirror. His reflection stayed where it was, creating impossible distance between them. Gregory backed away from the mirror and left the bathroom quickly. The hallway seemed longer than it had been. More doors now, at least a dozen, when there had only been 3 or 4 before. He opened the second door on the right. It wasn't the office he'd left. It was another way station office, identical to the first but mirrored, everything on the opposite side. He tried the next door. Another office, this one with the furniture in different positions. The next door opened onto a scale lane as if he'd somehow walked outside without passing through an exit. Gregory closed that door and tried another, a storage room, a break room, a bathroom identical to the one he just left. Every door led somewhere different, none of them the place he needed to be. "Mr. Hammond," a voice behind him. Gregory turned. The female dot officer was standing at the end of the hall. "Are you lost?" "I'm trying to get back to the office, to resolve the weight issue." "You're going the wrong way, it's behind you." Gregory turned. Behind him, where there had been solid wall a moment ago, was an open doorway leading to the office. He walked through it, feeling reality shift around him like water. "We've recalculated your fine," the woman said, sitting at her desk. "You're actually 68,000 pounds over permitted weight. The fine is $12,400. That's insane. My truck only weighs 16,000 empty. My cargo is 64. That's 80,000 total. I can't possibly be 148,000 pounds. That's nearly double. The scale doesn't lie, Mr. Hammond. The scale is broken. Would you like to weigh again? We can run you across the scale a second time." Yes, let's do that." Gregory went back to his truck, started the engine, and pulled back onto the scale lane. The process repeated: stop on the scale, wait for the signal, watch the weight display. The numbers climbed: 20,000, 40,000, 60,000, 80,000, then kept climbing: 100,000, 120, 160. The numbers accelerated, spinning upward like a slot machine. 200,000 pounds, 300,000, 500,000. Gregory's truck groaned under impossible weight. The suspension compressed, tires flattening, frame creaking. But he could see there was no additional weight. Nothing on the truck but his original cargo. The scale was measuring something else, measuring weight that didn't exist in normal space. The display hit 1 million pounds and stopped. The scale platform cracked under the strain, concrete fracturing in spider web patterns. Alarms started blaring. The dot officers ran from the building, shouting into radios. Gregory released his brake and drove forward off the scale. As soon as his rear axles cleared the platform, his truck returned to normal, suspension back to normal height, tires properly inflated, frame silent. He looked in his mirror. The scale platform was intact, no cracks visible. The officers had disappeared. He drove toward the exit, desperate to get away from this place. But the exit ramp looped back to the entrance. He tried again, same result. Every time he tried to leave, the road curved back to the way station entrance. After the seventh attempt, Gregory pulled into the parking area and stopped. Through his windshield, he could see the way station building. But it was changing, growing. What had been a single-story structure was now 2 stories, then 3. Wings extended from the main building. A parking lot that had held maybe 20 vehicles now stretched to the horizon, filled with hundreds of trucks. Gregory got out and walked toward the building. The entrance was the same door he'd used before, but now it opened into a massive lobby. Dozens of other drivers milled around, all looking confused and frightened. Gregory approached the nearest one, a young guy maybe 25 years old. "How long have you been here?" Gregory asked. The young driver looked at him with hollow eyes. "I don't know, days, weeks. I came in for a weight check and couldn't leave." "What's your name?" Derek Foster. I drive for Prime." Gregory looked around the lobby. Some of the drivers looked recent, still alert and coherent. Others looked like they'd been here much longer, gaunt, dirty, moving like zombies. One man sat in a corner rocking back and forth, mumbling about weight measurements. A door opened, a big door, ornate and heavy, and the female DOT officer stepped through. Her appearance had changed. No longer a simple uniform. Now she wore something more elaborate, more ceremonial. A robe made of what looked like woven scales, brass weights hanging from her belt. "Drivers," she announced, "it's time for evening. Please form a line." The drivers shuffled into a line with the resignation of people who'd done this many times before. Gregory hung back, watching. One by one, the drivers stepped onto a platform in the center of the lobby. The woman consulted a massive ledger, running her finger down columns of numbers. "Derek Foster," she called. Derek stepped onto the platform. "Weight at last check, 5,273 pounds. Current weight, 5,312. Net gain, 39 pounds. Acceptable. You may proceed to the dormitory." Derek stepped off the platform and walked through another door, shoulders slumped. The next driver was called, an older man, maybe 60. Weight at last check, 6,104 pounds. Current weight, 6,891. Net gain, 787 pounds. Excessive. Report to the reduction facility. The old man's face crumpled. 2 orderlies appeared and escorted him through a different door, one that Gregory noticed had a red light above it. He never saw what happened to that driver. The line moved forward. Some drivers passed with acceptable weight gains. Others were sent to the reduction facility. When Gregory's turn came, he stepped onto the platform with dread. "Gregory Hammond," the woman said, consulting her ledger. "First weigh in. Current weight, 10,622 pounds. Initial weight recorded. You are assigned to dormitory 3. Please proceed." "What is this place?" Gregory demanded. "What are you doing to us?" "This is a weigh station, Mr. Hammond. We measure weight. Yours, everyone's. Weight of sin, weight of regret, weight of choices. All the invisible weight you carry through life. Here, we make it measurable. We make it real. I want to leave." "You can leave when your weight balances, when what you carry equals what you can release. Some drivers achieve balance quickly. Others don't." Gregory was shown to a dormitory, a large room filled with bunk beds, maybe 50 drivers sleeping or sitting or staring at walls. He found an empty bunk and sat down. A driver in the next bunk, a Hispanic man in his 40s, turned to him. "First day?" the man asked. "Yeah, how long have you been here?" 6 months, I think. Hard to tell. Time is strange here." "What happens in the reduction facility?" "They take weight from you. Memories mostly. You forget things. Family, friends, life before driving. Each session you come back lighter, but emptier. After enough sessions, you balance. They let you leave, but you don't remember why you wanted to leave. Gregory thought about his daughter's wedding next month, his grandkids he saw every Sunday, his wife of 30 years. If they took those memories, if they reduced him balanced, would he even be himself anymore? Over the next several days, or what felt like days in that timeless place, Gregory watched drivers come and go. He attended mandatory weigh-ins, watched his number climb as the weight of worry and fear accumulated, watched other drivers sent to reduction, returning blank-faced and lighter, one step closer to release and one step further from humanity. On what he thought might be his 8th day, Gregory had an idea. The scale measured invisible weight, emotion, memory, regret. What if he could shed that weight without the reduction facility? What if he could voluntarily let go? He started with small things. Anger at a coworker who'd wronged him years ago. He consciously released it, forgave, and forgot. Resentment toward his brother over a family argument, gone. Shame about a business failure in his 20s, released. Every grudge, every regret, every piece of emotional weight he'd been carrying, Gregory examined and deliberately let go. At the next weigh-in, his weight had decreased. Not much, but enough to notice. The woman with the ledger frowned but said nothing. Gregory continued the process. Bigger things now. Fear of death, he acknowledged it and released it. Guilt about time missed with his family, he forgave himself. Every burden he'd been carrying, he examined in the light of consciousness and chose to set down. His weight dropped dramatically. Other drivers noticed, asked his secret. Some tried to follow his example. Most couldn't. The weight was too integrated into who they were, too fundamental to simply release. After what might have been 2 weeks, Gregory stepped onto the platform for weigh-in and the woman announced, "Gregory Hammond, current weight 0 pounds. You have achieved balance. You are free to leave." The exit door opened, not the one that led back to the scale lane, but a different door, one that glowed with normal daylight. Gregory walked toward it, feeling lighter than he'd felt in years. Not empty like the reduction facility drivers, but unburdened, aware, awake. He stepped through the door and found himself standing next to his truck in the weigh station parking lot. The building was back to its normal size. A DOT officer, a different one, normal and human, approached him. "Sir, you've been parked here for 3 hours. Are you having a breakdown?" 3 hours. Gregory checked his watch. It was still June 15th, still morning, barely any time passed. "Yeah, you pulled in for inspection and then just parked here. We were getting concerned. Are you okay to drive?" Gregory nodded. Yeah, I'm okay." He climbed into his truck, started the engine. The load still weighed 80,000 pounds. The permits were valid. Everything was normal. He pulled onto and continued east, watching the weigh station disappear in his mirrors. Gregory completed that run and many others. He's still driving for Schneider, still hauling heavyweight loads. But he's different now, lighter in ways that have nothing to do with the scale. He doesn't carry grudges anymore, doesn't hold onto regrets or fears the way he used to. And whenever he passes a weigh station, any weigh station, Gregory checks his emotional weight. Make sure he's not accumulating invisible burdens that might pull him back to that impossible place where all the weight drivers carry, the loneliness, the missed time with family, the roads that stretch endlessly away from home, becomes real and measurable and can trap you in a building that grows to accommodate all the lost souls who weighed too much to leave. Story 10. The Final Delivery. Samuel Porter had been driving for Old Dominion Freight Line for 26 years, longer than any other driver in his terminal. At 61 years old, with retirement planned for the end of the year, he was considered a legend among the younger drivers, a man who'd seen every kind of weather, every kind of road, every kind of cargo. On December 20th, 2022, running a priority delivery from Charlotte to Atlanta in time for the Christmas rush, Samuel accepted a last-minute addition to his manifest that turned his final year of driving into something he hadn't anticipated. The main load was standard holiday freight, electronics, toys, household goods destined for retailers stocking their shelves for last-minute Christmas shoppers. Samuel had loaded at 4 a.m., planned to be in Atlanta by early afternoon, then drive home to Charlotte to spend the holidays with his family. Easy run. Last big delivery before he scaled back for his final few months. As Samuel was completing his pre-trip inspection, his dispatcher approached with a tablet. "Hey Sam, got a last-minute addition. Small item, but it's high priority. Client paid big money for guaranteed delivery before Christmas." Samuel looked at the tablet. The addition was listed as a wooden box, dimensions 12 by 12 by 12 inches, weight 8 pounds. Pickup from a residential address in Charlotte, delivery to a residential address in Atlanta. Unusual. Old Dominion normally didn't handle residential pickups, especially not for such small items. But the dispatcher explained the client had connections with the company president, had paid 5 times the normal rate for the service. The address was in an older neighborhood east of downtown Charlotte. Samuel found the house, a Victorian-style place that looked maintained but aged, paint fading, porch sagging slightly. An elderly woman answered his knock. She had to be in her 80s, maybe 90, thin and frail with eyes that seemed to look through Samuel rather than at him. "You're here for the package," she said, not a question. "Yes, ma'am." Samuel Porter with Old Dominion. She disappeared into the house and returned carrying a wooden box exactly as described. The wood was dark, polished, with elaborate carvings on all sides, symbols Samuel didn't recognize, patterns that seemed to move slightly when he looked at them directly. "Handle it carefully," the woman said. "It's very precious, irreplaceable." "Yes, ma'am, we'll treat it with care. Can I ask what's inside for insurance purposes?" "A gift for my granddaughter in Atlanta. She's been waiting a very long time for this." Samuel took the box. It was heavier than 8 pounds, felt more like 20 or 30. He almost commented but decided against it. Old people sometimes misjudged weight. He secured it in his cab rather than the freight area, buckled it into the passenger seat to ensure it wouldn't shift during the drive. The woman watched him secure the box. "Thank you for doing this. It means more than you know." "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No, it's more than that. You'll understand by the end." Samuel didn't know what she meant by that but nodded politely and climbed into his cab. In his mirror, he saw the old woman standing on her porch, watching him drive away. Something about her expression bothered him, not sad exactly, but resigned, like she just completed a difficult but necessary task. On the highway heading south, Samuel found himself glancing at the box periodically. The carving seemed more intricate every time he looked. What had appeared to be simple geometric patterns now looked like scenes, tiny figures, landscapes, buildings. But every time he tried to focus on specific details, they blurred and shifted. Around Gastonia, Samuel started hearing sounds from the box, not rattling or shifting like cargo moving, sounds that shouldn't come from inside a wooden container. Breathing, whispers, once distinctly a child crying. Samuel pulled onto the shoulder and sat staring at the box. He was imagining things. Had to be. Wooden boxes didn't breathe, didn't whisper. He'd been driving too long, mind playing tricks. But when he reached for the box, intending to inspect it more closely, it felt warm. Not sun-warmed or heat from the vent warm. Body warm, like something alive was inside. Samuel pulled his hand back. Thing would be to call his dispatcher, explain the situation, maybe refuse to complete the delivery. But he'd never refused a delivery in 26 years. Wasn't about to start now, especially not based on imagination and paranoia. He pulled back onto the highway and continued south. The sounds from the box continued, sometimes whispers, sometimes crying, sometimes laughter. Once he clearly heard a voice say his name. "Samuel, Samuel Porter." "Who's there?" Samuel asked, feeling foolish talking to a box. "We've been waiting for you," the voice responded. Multiple voices now, overlapping, speaking in harmony. "For so long. Waiting for the final driver." "Final driver, what does that mean?" "You're the last one, the one who completes the delivery, the one who closes the circle." "I don't understand." "You will in Atlanta when you see her, when you understand what you're carrying." Samuel considered throwing the box out the window, just getting rid of it, but something stopped him. Partly professional pride, he'd accepted the delivery, and Samuel Porter completed his deliveries, but also curiosity. And something deeper, a feeling he couldn't quite name. Like this was important. Like whatever was happening was meant to happen. The miles rolled past. South Carolina, the Georgia border. The whispers from the box formed into stories. Samuel heard about other drivers, other deliveries. A man named Charles who'd driven stagecoaches in the 1800s. A woman named Ruth who'd piloted supply trucks during World War II. Dozens of drivers across centuries, each one carrying this box, each one making this same delivery from somewhere to somewhere else, completing a link in a chain that stretched back further than Samuel could comprehend. "What is this?" Samuel asked. "What am I really delivering?" "Hope," the voices answered, "and horror, and everything between. You're delivering the weight of all the miles all the drivers have ever driven. All the loneliness, all the freedom, all the endless road. It accumulates. Gets heavy, needs to be delivered, passed on, or it crushes the one who carries it. I don't feel crushed. Not yet, but you would, if you kept driving, if you didn't retire. The road takes, and eventually there's nothing left to take. We save you from that. This delivery saves you." Atlanta appeared ahead, the skyline emerging from the afternoon haze. Samuel followed his GPS to the delivery address, another residential area, this time in an older part of the city near Grant Park. The house was similar to the pickup location, Victorian, old, well-maintained but showing age. A young woman answered the door, mid-20s with eyes looked old despite her young face. The same eyes as the woman in Charlotte, something in the expression, the way they seemed to see beyond normal sight. "You have a delivery for me," she said. "Yes, ma'am." Samuel retrieved the box from his cab. It was lighter now, barely weighed anything. The carvings had simplified, returned to basic geometric patterns. The young woman took the box with reverence. "Thank you, my grandmother sent this." "Yes, woman in Charlotte said it was a gift that you'd been waiting. I have all my life in a sense. This box contains my inheritance, my family's inheritance." She opened the lid slightly, just enough for Samuel to glimpse what was inside. It wasn't a physical object. It was light, but not normal light. Light that contained images, memories, emotions. Samuel saw flash frames of highways, truck stops, lonely midnight drives. Saw hundreds of faces, drivers from different eras, all connected by the road. Saw himself, his own face among them, his own memories of 26 years behind the wheel. "What is that?" Samuel asked. "The collected experience of every driver in our family line. We're stewards in a way. We gather the weight of the road, keep it from crushing individual drivers, pass it along to the next generation. My grandmother held it for 60 years. Now it's my turn. I don't understand. How does this help anyone? Because it takes the burden. Every driver accumulates weight, loneliness, missing family events, the endless sameness of the road. That weight builds until it breaks you or you break free. This box absorbs it, carries it, allows drivers to retire instead of dying behind the wheel or going mad from the isolation." Samuel thought about the drivers he'd known who died of heart attacks in their cabs, the ones who'd driven until they literally couldn't anymore, the ones who'd retired and died within months because the road was all they'd known. He thought about his own plan to retire, his certainty that he could walk away cleanly. "I've been selected, haven't I? That's what this delivery means." The young woman nodded. "Every driver who completes this delivery is marked, protected. You'll be able to retire without the weight crushing you. You'll remember the good parts, the freedom, the open road, the sunrises from your cab. But the heavy parts, the burden of all those missed moments and lonely miles, those go into the box. And you carry it. Until I pass it to my granddaughter, yes. It's our family's purpose. Has been for generations. We carry the weight so drivers don't have to." Samuel looked at the box, at the light inside that contained pieces of his life. "What if I don't want to give it up? The weight is mine to carry. Then you keep it. Some drivers choose that. They die with it, but most are grateful to be free. Samuel thought about his family waiting in Charlotte, his grandkids who wanted him to come to their Christmas pageant, his wife who'd been patient through 26 years of him being gone more than home. He thought about the freedom to walk away from the truck without looking back, without the phantom pull of the highway calling him out for one more run. "Take it," Samuel said. "Take whatever weight I've been carrying. I want to go home." The young woman smiled. "You already have. The delivery was the final act. You're free now." Samuel felt it then. A lightness he hadn't known was missing. Like setting down a heavy bag he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. The highway's call, the restlessness that had driven him for 26 years, simply stopped. He drove back to Charlotte that evening, completed his shift, parked his truck for the last time. Old Dominion had planned for him to drive until December 31st, but Samuel called his dispatcher and told him he was done. Effective immediately. 26 years was enough. Samuel's retirement was easy in a way that shocked everyone who knew him. Most veteran drivers struggled, went back to driving within months, couldn't handle the absence of the road. But Samuel transitioned smoothly, spent time with his grandkids, took his wife on the vacation she'd always wanted, garden, read, lived. He sometimes thinks about that box, about the young woman carrying the accumulated weight of thousands of drivers, wonders how heavy it gets, wonders if she's lonely bearing that burden. But mostly he's grateful. Grateful for 26 years of driving, grateful for the freedom to walk away, grateful to be home. On Christmas Eve, a package arrived at Samuel's house. Inside was a wooden ornament carved with the same patterns that had covered the box. A note was attached, written in elegant handwriting. "Thank you for completing the delivery. You carried the weight with honor. Rest well. You've earned it." Samuel hangs the ornament on his tree every Christmas, a reminder of his final delivery and the mysterious family that carries the burden of the road so drivers can find their way home. And sometimes, late at night, he hears whispers from the ornament, the voices of other retired drivers, free like him, living the lives they'd earned. Together, they form a chorus of gratitude, a reminder that some deliveries are about more than just freight. Some deliveries are about delivering yourself from the weight of a life lived on highways, about finding an exit that leads not to another truck stop or another load, but to home. The real, permanent kind of home that doesn't move, doesn't change, and waits patiently for the driver to finally, gratefully arrive.